Calculated Risk, A Cross-Security Investigation, Book 2. Written by G.K.Parks, narrated by Danny Holt. Chapter 1.
You're in a good mood.
Justin glanced at me as I entered the office, confused by my humming.
Did you get laid?
No, but on the bright side, I didn't get screwed. I picked up the stack of mail and flipped through the envelopes. Bill, check, junk. I put the junk in the shred file, left the bills for Justin to pay, and tore open the check from our latest corporate security overhaul of Rathbone Enterprises. I turned to the desk behind me, but our receptionist was nowhere to be found. Where's Gloria?
Breakfast run?
But she's the receptionist. Why is she getting breakfast?
Lucien.
Justin leaned back in his chair.
Aside from the hired muscle and the one forensic expert you couldn't live without, it's just the three of us.
I thought for a moment. Cross-security and investigations needed more assistance, more tech, and more office space. However, the first two would have to wait until after the move, and to do that, we needed more money. The settlement I'd gotten would put us on the map, but I wanted to make sure we had an ideal office location. The bigger and bolder we looked on the outside, the better. So far, the vast majority of clients I'd signed had known me from my days on Wall Street and trusted that my business savvy and head for wise tech investments that had made them millions would also safeguard those millions from hackers, thieves, and questionable employees. I'd only taken on a couple of unknowns since. They'd been mostly minor cases, with one glaringly obvious exception. Jade McNamara. Again, I found myself humming. Shit. The smile tugged at the corner of my lips. This had to stop. Rubbing a hand over my mouth, I tried to focus on the negatives. The scars on my back, the weeks spent in the hospital, and the weeks spent recovering were all checks in the con column. No amount of money could fix that, or what I'd done to the man who tried to kill Jade and me. Yet I found myself focusing on the positives. The payout from the police department padded my bank account. It'd pay for our move. It'd even pay for the equipment Amir Karam forced me to agree to before he'd sign a contract to work for Cross Security. Plus, it meant something far more meaningful. Jade was safe, and in a few hours, she'd be coming home. Justin quirked an eyebrow.
Seriously, Lucien, what's going on?
Nothing. I was just thinking Rathbone's check might be enough to hire someone to run errands.
Isn't that my job? Or are you finally promoting me?
You already own a stake in the company. Isn't that enough?
I'd like my own office.
We'll see. King Realty is scouting locations for us. As soon as they find something that lives up to Amir's lab specifications, we'll discuss your office situation.
I hope this guy's as good as his reputation.
Justin reached into the drawer for the checkbook.
Are you sure you don't want to set up automatic bill pay? What happens if I take a vacation and no one's here to keep the lights on?
I guess we'll work in the dark.
At least you have a plan, boss.
Don't I always? I went into what had once been a closet and was now our break room and made a cup of coffee using the espresso maker. Then I made one for Justin and returned to the outer office. What's on the agenda today?
You have a meeting with your new client at 9, lunch with Miranda to discuss extending her contract at 11, and conference calls from prospective businessmen to discuss corporate security at 2 and 4.
He slipped the check into the envelope and sealed it.
Are you sure you don't want to try online trading instead? We're money guys. We served our time on Wall Street. We could take another stab at it. Don't you think we're better equipped to do that than this?
Hey, I narrowed my eyes, knowing my former intern, turned executive assistant, wanted to yank my chain. It served me right for coming into the office humming a pop song. Frankly, I should have been relieved he didn't shoot me on sight. Thankfully, he was still one gun safety class away from a carry permit. I didn't get my PI license for nothing.
Yeah, well, I just thought maybe after everything you might have reconsidered. We're blackballed from most of the investment banks and major trading companies, but you could start your own, or invest for yourself. You have that kind of cash now.
I had enough before.
I never thought I'd hear you say that.
Just as I opened my office door, he asked,
Are you sending a car to pick up Jade from the airport, or are you going to do it yourself?
I turned. How'd you know?
I might not have a fancy PI license, but I picked up a trick or two.
He also organized my calendar and scheduled most of my meetings. I'm picking her up.
Is she moving back?
I don't know. Justin nodded and returned to paying the bills. Settling in behind my desk, I reached for the intel I'd compiled on my newest client, Trey Knox. He'd seen the ad I'd taken out on the back of a business magazine and decided to give me a call. I'd done the consultation over the phone. Knox's home had been burglarized. His collection of valuable sports memorabilia had been stolen, along with whatever cash, jewelry, and other high-ticket items the thieves had been able to haul off. The police had yet to catch the culprits, and I doubted they would. Even Knox doubted them, which is why he came to me. Specialty items like signed jerseys and MVP rings would be difficult to fence without catching someone's attention. That must have been what the police were counting on, assuming they even gave a damn about helping Mr. Knox recover his property. But I was biased. I went to the police academy and almost graduated. Almost. But my father, Mr. Police Commissioner, made sure that didn't happen. Just like he let an asshole like Scott Renwin carry a badge. Again, I found myself falling into the bottomless pit of anger and bitterness. So I shook it off. Mr. Knox had a problem. The cops hadn't helped him yet, so in the meantime, I might as well try. That's why I started Cross Security. It was time to put my money where my mouth was. Shaking off the unexpected anger, I reread the copy of the police report Knox had sent me. The security system had been dismantled, not disarmed. Whoever broke into Knox's house had to be a professional crew. Knox lived in a gated community. Getting in and out wouldn't be easy. The security guards and cameras didn't catch anything. The interior cameras had been shorted out, and according to the guards' statements, no one suspicious entered or left the area on the night in question. Knox didn't see anything, and neither did his neighbors. The police believed the thieves breached the residence by entering through a first-floor window, but I had my doubts. According to what I'd found, several break-ins had occurred in the area over the last few weeks. The police had no leads, but they assumed it was the same crew. However, none of those other burglarized locations had high-end security systems, so either the crooks had moved on to bigger and better things, or someone else broke into Knox's house, knew exactly how to get in and out without tripping an alarm, and knew what to take. That meant it might be personal. "Tell me your secrets, Trey Knox." My fingers flew over the keyboard. Knox, Trey. No criminal record. I checked his employment history. He'd worked his way up to acquisitions manager at the same company where he first started interning 17 years ago. That probably meant he was loyal and hardworking, or unimaginative, complacent, and a kiss-ass. One or the other. It also meant his colleagues must know him well. They'd probably been to his house for barbecues or to watch the big game. That could make them suspects. I wrote a note to ask about recent problems at work, then I moved on to his social media presence. But I didn't find much. He remained professional online. Everything was buttoned up. After a few quick searches, I found some fantasy sports leagues Knox belonged to, but that didn't tell me much about his real-life friends or acquaintances. I bookmarked the pages, figuring if nothing else turned up, I could do a deep dive on these sports maniacs to see if one of them had the skills and balls necessary to conduct the break-in. As far as I could tell, Knox's main concern had been his stolen sports memorabilia. He had signed all-star jerseys, a championship ring, pennants, and game balls, and they had all been taken. According to Knox, these items were irreplaceable. He didn't seem to give a damn about his watches, cash, or stolen electronics. Those he could replace. His precious collection was another story, and the longer it was gone, the less likely the police were to recover it. Even if they did, they'd hold the items as evidence until after the trial. When I mentioned that tidbit to Knox, he'd grown even more desperate. I had emailed him my boilerplate contract to review, and my daily rate. He told me he'd think about it, only to call back an hour later and say he wanted my help. That was 2 days ago. I pressed the button on the intercom. "Justin, did you run a credit check on Trey Knox?"
His credit's not stellar, but he has enough in the bank to pay us.
"What about his house and car?"
Lease and mortgage.
"Credit card debt?"
He makes payments every month. His cards have $20,000 limits, and they're each about 3/4 full.
"How many cards does he have?"
3.
"Student loans?"
None.
"That's a plus." "Did anything send up a red flag?"
Not that I've seen.
The intercom clicked, and Justin stepped into my doorway, giving me the look that told me he thought it was ridiculous we had an intercom when he was sitting 15 feet away.
"Do you think this is a scam? Insurance fraud?"
He handed me a few printed pages. Most of the unpaid charges on Knox's cards were season tickets and box seats to football and baseball games, and auction charges. A few were for online gambling and fantasy leagues. This guy really loved sports. He likes expensive toys, but if he just gave up his hobby, he could pay off his cards. So it's probably not a scam. But I'll ask him if he had his collection appraised or insured.
You might want to take a look at his homeowner's insurance policy, too.
I pointed a finger pistol at Justin. Brilliant suggestion. Call Knox and ask him to bring it with him today. My assistant glanced at the time.
He might already be on his way, but I'll see if I can catch him.
Thanks. Chapter 2. Do you have somewhere else to be? I asked. Knox shook his head, tearing his eyes away from the clock. Sorry, I was just thinking about traffic. I rocked back in my chair. Is this everyone who's been to your house? Yeah, I think so. Knox rubbed his forehead and leaned closer to check the list he'd made for the third time. The police said the cleaning lady has an alibi, but I never thought she'd do something like this. None of my friends would. What about your colleagues? Nah, they're cool guys. The only times they've stopped by were to watch games or help me crunch numbers for work. What about repairmen or delivery guys? The house is still new enough that I haven't had to get anything repaired. Touch wood. Knox knocked twice on the top of my desk. The cable guy's the only person I can think of who's been inside that I didn't know, and that was when I first moved in. Everything was still in boxes. When did you move in? I asked, too lazy to look at the paperwork. 4-ish years ago. Any problems with your neighbors? Any complaints or issues? Look, Lucien, I've already been over these questions with the police. No one I know would do something like this. Whoever came into my house and stole my stuff is a complete stranger. I wouldn't affiliate with criminals or shady types. He'd even said it more than once for emphasis during our previous conversation. I wasn't suggesting that, but it seems the thieves might have had prior knowledge of your security system and the layout of your house. One might even entertain the notion that the thieves knew what was inside your house, which is why you were targeted. Perhaps. Knox reached for the list of stolen items. Nowadays, everyone has a tablet. They probably just got lucky with my VR set. Did they just get lucky with 2 designer watches, a few pairs of gold cufflinks, and $5,000 in cash? Yeah, I guess. Knox put the list down. I'd like to get everything back, but I'm hiring you to find my memorabilia. That's your top priority. The rest is just icing. I reached for the list. 4 signed jerseys, a World Series pennant, signed by every single player. Uh-huh. It was worth less than $2,000, but just like everything else in Knox's collection, he thought it was priceless. A few bobbleheads, 2 signed basketballs, a hockey puck from the Stanley Cup Finals. I looked up from the paper. No soccer? What? Soccer, the most popular sport in the world? He stared at me in horror. I like American sports? America has a soccer team. They suck. He jerked his chin at the list. Football. American football. That's where it's at. Do they call them baseball cards? I pointed to the page. They're football cards, right? Since it's football? I might have been taking a little too much joy out of asking these pointless questions, but it made me feel like a real gumshoe. Perhaps I needed the practice. You call them trading cards. They have the player stats on the back. Mine were mint, all signed, and encased in protective sleeves. Good idea to keep your assets in protective sleeves. My thoughts drifted to Jade's impending arrival. I should make a stop at the pharmacy before I picked her up, just in case she missed me as much as I'd missed her these last few months. Knox continued to talk about his collection, flashing photos of various pieces towards me as he scrolled through the content on his phone. I tried to pay attention, but this reminded me of second-grade show and tell, when that one geeky kid with no friends insisted on showing us his action figures he kept inside their boxes. As a 7-year-old, I found the idea of having a toy and not playing with it asinine, and Knox's fondness and devotion to a collection of things that he kept framed and on display, but served little to no use, seemed just as asinine. If nothing else, I want that MVP ring back. It took me years to find one for sale, and once I did, I spared no expense. That's what you have to find. Why didn't you keep your valuables in locked cases? Or a safe? I asked. Knox stared at me as though I'd said something in Klingon. I bought them to enjoy them. I have them on display so I can see them.
Now, when I go home, there's nothing but bare walls and shelves."
He looked utterly distraught.
"I'd do anything to get my stuff back. I can't believe someone would stoop so low to do something like this. Cash is one thing, but a man's prized possessions are something else entirely."
"So you think the thieves took your collection as a personal attack? To add insult to injury?"
"I don't know. I never thought this would happen."
He scratched his neck.
"You keep saying thieves. Why do you think it's more than one guy?"
"The police said a crew's been hitting houses in the area. They're under the impression they are responsible for the break-ins at your place, which means once they try to fence upon your collection, they'll get nabbed."
"I don't want to wait for that to happen. By then it'll be too late. It could all be gone."
His breath became frantic, and his cheeks pinkened.
"I didn't hire you to fall in line with what the cops think. During my consultation, you said you didn't buy into that. Have you changed your mind? Maybe this isn't the right fit for me after all."
He moved to stand, and I watched, waiting to see if he'd storm out. Instead, he stopped mid-squat, his hands firmly grasping the arms of the chair, while he waited for my answer. "You seem certain this isn't the same crew. What aren't you telling me?" I asked.
"Nothing. But you said recovering my stolen collection wasn't a police priority."
"It isn't, but I'll make it mine."
"That's not how it sounded a second ago."
I cleared my throat, forgetting how much hand-holding went into dealing with non-corporate clients. "In that case, I apologize for the miscommunication. However, you said taking your collection felt personal, which indicates whoever did this knows about your hobby and how big of a score taking these items really is."
"Like I was targeted by a professional thief?"
Given the way the security system was dismantled, more than one individual was involved in the actual crime. I reached for the copy of the police report. "I've done my homework on your security system. In order to dismantle it so as not to trip the alarm, 3 people had to remove the connectors from these 3 boxes simultaneously. So, it was a crew. Whether or not it's the same crew who's been targeting other houses is yet to be seen. Since you are such a sports enthusiast, I'm guessing you must frequent auction sites and message boards. Have you bragged to anyone online about your scores?"
"Sure, I guess."
"Okay." I made a note to take a look at his browser history to see if another sports fan had gotten pissed and decided to take what he wanted instead.
"I have paperwork on everything that was taken, certificates of sale and authenticity."
He grabbed the attaché case off the seat beside him and pulled out a folder.
"The information on the auction sites and houses where I made the purchases is included."
"Great." Too bad all my clients weren't this prepared. I took the folder and skimmed the information. This would require several phone calls, employee background checks, and possibly a peek into their records for details on the other bidders interested in these stolen items. If nothing else, the losing bidders might have their ears to the ground on ways to obtain these treasured pieces of sports history through less than legal means. I'd have to do some digging. "What about insurance?"
"My house insurance covers theft up to a certain amount. I didn't upgrade when I made the last few purchases."
I clicked the messenger icon on my computer and typed a message to Justin, asking him to see if Knox had made any inquiries into selling his collection, or any of the more expensive pieces from the collection. Unless he had already sold off the stolen items, I didn't think this was an insurance scam.
"Do you think you can find them?"
Knox asked.
"They're all special, but that ring is one of a kind. It's my most prized possession. My dad had scrimped and saved to take me to that game. That's the game where my favorite player got named MVP and received the ring. My dad passed recently, so I never got to show him what I bought as a memento, but it has special meaning to me."
"I'll do what I can. You said your friends and colleagues wouldn't do anything like this. What about a vengeful ex?" He shook his head. "What about recent paramours? A crew broke into your house. Perhaps they'll have a 4th working with them who picks out the marks, assesses the layout and security, and reports back."
"You make this sound like a heist."
"Wasn't it?"
"Yeah, I guess it was."
"So? Girlfriends, hookups, any new people come into your house or life in the last few weeks?"
"No one. I wouldn't put it past my college ex, but we haven't seen each other in half a decade. She's never been to my house or seen the MVP ring or my recent additions."
Thoughts of Jade drifted to mind, my blood boiling at the thought of her vengeful ex and the damage he inflicted. My back still pinched every time I turned too quickly, and my legs would go numb on occasion. The doctor said that was normal and the symptoms should continue to improve as long as I continued doing the exercises and following their advice. Nonetheless, it pissed me off every time it happened.
Yoo-hoo!
He waved his hand in front of my face.
You still with me?
I'll look into her anyway. Picking up the pen, I remained poised to write until he finally gave me her name. While he expounded on what went wrong between them, I ran a quick background check and did several searches. She wasn't responsible. She didn't even live in the tri-state area. Sighing, I tossed my pen back on the desk. Do you have any enemies or some sort of fucked-up family drama or sibling rivalry going on?
Not that I can think of.
Is it possible this could be a prank?
Hell no!
Okay, so we're back to looking at a professional crew, most likely comprised of strangers. Still, the surgical precision of the break-in made me question that assessment. Can you think of any other collectors who might want to take your collection from you? While Knox blathered on, I took notes, but strangers on the other end of the bidding wars wouldn't necessarily know where Knox lived, or what kind of security he had in place. The break-in wouldn't have been this clean. Something didn't fit.
When can you start searching?
He asked. I've already started.
Okay, how long do you think it'll take?
For a recovery?
Yes.
I'll reach out to Fences, do some research, and see what's what. I told you before that I can't guarantee results, but your chances are better with me than the police department.
What kind of odds are we talking?
I'd never worked a recovery before, but finding stolen property and returning it shouldn't be that difficult, especially when dealing with one-of-a-kind items like these. I could probably put the word out, offer a huge payday, and wait for the thieves to surface. The bringing them to justice part would be more difficult, especially since I was to recover the evidence, not turn it in, but that would be up to my client to decide. He just wanted his stuff back. 50-50.
All right, let's see what you can do.
He shook my hand. Chapter 3.
You've got it bad.
Miranda held the tiny coffee mug beneath her chin, letting the steam rise.
How long were you two together?
Come on, Miranda, we're here to talk about your business, not my personal life. She made a pff sound and stared at me with those big doe eyes. No wonder millions of people bought her albums, posters, and T-shirts. Sure, she might have been one of the biggest names in the music industry, but it wasn't entirely about her music. It was about her look, the sex appeal, the husky voice, the way she moved. We'd had our share of fun on a few occasions. That had been when I was in charge of investing her money and raking in the millions.
Don't give me that bullshit, Lucien. I asked for you to be put on my accounts because I could tell you were a real go-getter. I've just never seen you want to get someone before. This is new for you, isn't it? I bet women fall at your feet. You've probably never had to pursue one before. Flowers are good. Jewelry's better. Do you know a ring size?
I ignored her prying questions. You asked for me to be put on your accounts because I was the best-looking guy in the office and you had an ulterior motive.
That too. But I wasn't wrong about the go-getter part. You made me enough smart investments that I was able to tell the label to shove it and branch out on my own. And let's not forget about the celebratory sex.
My hand went through my hair, a nervous tick I had yet to shake. She laughed.
Oh, I love making you squirm.
She checked her phone.
Want to check into a hotel for lunch?
We have business to discuss. She narrowed her eyes at me, placed the cup on the desk, and picked up a pen.
Fine. I want a full detail to accompany me for the rest of my tour. 24-hour protection, not just at the venues, but in the hotels, at home, restaurants, clubs, whatever.
You'll need more than 6 guards for 24-hour protection if you want to continue to have a 4-person entourage.
My entourage is a lot bigger than 4, but I know what you mean. At shows, I'll need 6.
I thought your band had a security team.
It does. The business does. This is personal security just for me. Band security does what it can, but they work more crowd control than anything. In private, or when I am without the party, I only need 2.
8 then, at least, to start. 12 would be ideal, but I couldn't give her every trained security member I had on the payroll. Opening a note tab, I added another candidate search to the list of things to do, and reserved 2 days to conduct interviews next week. Until we got the new offices, the security teams remained on call until I needed them. We might want to revisit this in a few months and consider an upgrade. She snickered.
Only if you sneak away for lunch.
I can do lunch. I just can't do you."
Pity.
She signed the contract and slid it across the desk.
You were always good in the sack. What if I upgrade to 2 years instead of 1? Do I get you as a perk?
"You realize by signing with my firm, in essence, you're employing me." She rolled her eyes.
I'm not harassing you, sexually or otherwise. If I were, you wouldn't be enjoying it this much.
That was true, and I didn't want to quibble. "Where would you like to go to lunch?" She waved a dismissive hand at me.
You're really not going to tell me about the girl.
"There is no girl."
Justin said you're picking someone up from the airport.
"Justin's fired." I leaned toward my open office door and raised my voice a little. "Did you hear that?"
What, sir? You'll have to use the intercom,
Justin called from the main room. Miranda giggled.
I don't see how you get any work done around here.
"We don't." I'd been useless most of the day as my thoughts kept drifting to Jade and what I needed to do before I picked her up and what would happen once I did. Miranda climbed out of the chair.
Fine, don't tell me about the girl, but she must be something special to have you so smitten that you'd give up on lunch.
I said we could go to lunch.
That's not the lunch I was talking about.
She leaned over and pressed her lips against my cheek.
I'll give you a rain check for the next time I'm in town, but you might not need it. I hope things work out with you and the mystery woman. You're a good guy, Lucien. You should have everything you want. Just don't be a chicken shit, and make sure she knows what you want. Girls don't like games.
Isn't that from one of your songs? She laughed softly.
Oh, if you think you're going to trick me into giving you a private concert, you're mistaken.
I'll see you again in 3 months, I said. She quirked an eyebrow at me. I'm in charge of your personal security. I know your schedule by heart. I probably know it better than you. You'll be playing a gig in the city in 3 months. I'll be there.
You better be. She went to the door. Remind me to have someone leave an extra ticket at the door for your lady friend, if that's still going on.
I walked her to the door and leaned against the jamb while she said a few parting words to Justin and signed a T-shirt for Gloria's niece. 2 cross-security specialists escorted her out of the office and to the elevator. We need to hire more security specialists, I said. Pull the resumes we have on file. If no one looks good enough, we'll have to reach out again and start another search.
Yes, sir.
Justin slid backward toward the filing cabinets and opened the middle drawer. And one more thing. Don't mention Jade to anyone else.
Miranda's different. You've known her for years. She's your friend.
Still, this is business. Let's keep church and state separate.
Can't do that if you slept with her,
Gloria murmured, earning a surprised look from me.
Sorry, I just can't believe you slept with her. She's a literal rock star.
Who said I slept with her? I glared at Justin's back.
She did,
Gloria said. I squeezed the bridge of my nose, feeling a headache coming on. Don't believe everything our clients say.
Or everything our boss says,
Justin warned her. He placed the stack of files on the edge of his desk.
Do you want me to start on this now, or continue looking into Mr. Knox's case?
Stick with Knox and see what you find. I'll skim through these and let you know what I want to do before I leave today. I also needed to review my notes for my next appointment. Gloria, I hate to ask, but would you mind ordering lunch for the office?
First breakfast and now lunch? Shh, I'm going to need a raise.
She grinned at me and winked at Justin. Did someone put a sign on my back or something? I bent my elbow and reached behind me, feeling the twinge near my left shoulder blade, but I refused to let that put a damper on my mood. Did Mr. Knox ask you to take one of his signed baseball bats to my balls?
Sorry, sir, Gloria said. What would you like for lunch?
Have the sandwich place down the street bring a platter of half sandwiches, salads, and soups. My fridge at home was nearly empty, and I didn't want Jade to starve. The leftovers would suffice until I found out how long she was staying. Gloria started dialing while I hefted the files off Justin's desk and went back into my office, coaxing the door to close by hooking my ankle around the bottom corner and giving it a yank as I went inside. It remained cracked open, but that was good enough. I didn't need complete privacy. After all, someone had to keep an eye on Justin and Gloria, or the inmates would be running the asylum in no time. Settling behind my desk, I reviewed my notes in order to prep and practice for my afternoon meetings, but my mind was elsewhere. I tapped my pen on the legal pad, finding myself doodling in the corner instead of listing the bullet points of my presentation. Maybe I needed more coffee.
Do you need something?
Justin asked when I stepped out of my office. A lobotomy.
I'll give it a whirl.
You would, wouldn't you? He laughed.
Do you want me to have a car deliver you to Miranda's hotel?
Turning, I stared at my assistant, unsure if that was a joke, but he had the best poker face I'd ever seen. It rivaled mine on days when I wasn't losing it. Actually, while you're pulling info on security specialists, see what you can find in terms of executive assistants.
Are we in the market?
I matched his look. It's possible. I made another espresso, grabbed 3 half sandwiches to keep the acid from eating away whatever was left of my stomach lining, and went back into my office. Focus, I mumbled to myself. In a whisper, I ran through my presentation for my first meeting, hitting the high points. I jotted down a few more notes, checked the time, and revised my presentation again. After lunch, I wiped away whatever crumbs there might be, tidied my appearance, and waited for my next potential client. The afternoon went by slowly, like a snail stuck in a wad of discarded chewing gum. But the meetings were advantageous. By the time 6 o'clock rolled around, Cross Security had 2 new corporate clients and an extensive list of things to do. That alone would keep us busy for the next month. We might have to hire a few freelancers to help us out on the IT side of things. I'll have to see if we can stagger our assignments. With any luck, I won't have to do 2 overhauls at the same time. Palming my keys, I checked the time again. Rush hour traffic could be a bear. In another 90 minutes, things would calm down, and I wouldn't have to spend the same amount of time stuck in traffic trying to get to the airport. Perhaps I'd stop by the liquor store after dropping the leftovers off at home. Jade didn't like gin, which was my drink of choice, or scotch, which is what a lot of my clients enjoyed. She liked tequila, rum, and red wine.
Do you want me to see who might be available?
Justin asked. I glanced at the empty desk. Gloria had gone home at 4:15, like she usually did. No, that's okay. I'll handle that myself.
All right. I have a list of 4 more security specialists that look promising on paper, but you never interviewed them. There were a few you wanted who initially had scheduling conflicts. I'll see if they're still looking for a permanent position.
Okay. I nodded a few times. Do another job posting online. See who else might be interested.
Roger.
I went to the door, turning as I opened it. I'm calling it quits. That means you get to go home.
In a sec. I just want to finish this up. I sent everything on Knox's case to your Dropbox, so you can check it out later if you want.
Tomorrow.
Night, Lucien.
Good night. Chapter 4. The racks of souvenirs stared back at me from the airport kiosk. Magnets, pens, water bottles, t-shirts, and jackets. The last time I'd visited this particular kiosk was when I'd been observing Jade's abusive ex-boyfriend. The bad memories sent a shiver down my spine, but I shook it off and waited in line to make my purchases. With the bag in hand, I made my way to baggage claim to wait for Jade. We agreed to meet here. Well, I agreed. She insisted I could pick her up outside, but that didn't sit well with me, so I told her I'd meet her at baggage claim. What kind of knight in shining armor didn't offer to carry a lady's bag for her? The screens told me her flight should be arriving on time. 7 minutes. Then I'd have to suffer through the slow process of deplaning. That probably meant at least a half hour. I found an empty seat at the end of a row, placed the bag securely on my lap, and took my phone out to check my Dropbox. Justin had sent me the details on the new potential hires and most of the information I'd asked him to dig up on Trey Knox. Since I wasn't in the right headspace to think about what security qualifications the new hire should have, I opened the Knox files. Knox's browser history and phone records were exactly what I expected to find. No surprises there. I scanned the names of his contacts, but no one appeared suspicious. He didn't have any threatening messages, and his call durations were standards. Threats usually happened in a matter of seconds with the caller hanging up. Still, I decided to err on the side of caution, and sent a text to Knox, asking again if anyone had threatened him or shown an inordinate amount of interest in his collection. He said no. No blocked numbers or burner phones called his cell. Everything appeared legitimate. I checked again, but I didn't see any 2 a.m. texts for booty calls or any personal or intimate messages. Knox had said as much, but I'd been warned not to take clients at face value. He didn't have a spouse or girlfriend. Still, I shouldn't rule anything out. So I made a note to find out if he used any dating or private messaging apps. That would explain the lack of text messages and phone activity. It could also be how the crew determined Knox would make a great mark and when to strike. It was no secret men liked to brag. For Knox, it wasn't how big his bat was. It might have been how special his collection was. Perhaps he hadn't said those things to a potential love interest on a dating site, but I'm sure he'd said them to plenty of people on the internet, other collectors, sports fans, or anyone willing to listen. His browser history didn't lead me to many message boards or social media pages. He didn't have photos of his prized possessions anywhere on his social media pages. For once, I'd stumbled upon someone who actually kept things private. But Knox didn't appear to have much time or interest in sharing his life with friends or strangers. He didn't have time with all the games and fantasy leagues. I shifted my focus to those boards, but everything looked like rankings, stats, and smack talk. Knox never mentioned the MVP ring, at least not that I noticed. Justin didn't find any postings or intel which indicated Knox had tried to sell his collection, so that was out. Trade shows, I mumbled. Knox had spent plenty of time on online auction sites and memorabilia sites, along with generic shopping searches, but he often went to trade shows. He might have spoken to vendors there. One of them could have decided to target him and shared that intel with the crew. I'd need to go over each certificate of sale, track the seller, and see where that led. I should have passed on the case. It was too tedious a venture, and Knox wasn't big enough to be worth this much time and effort. But he was the acquisitions manager at a big company. I wouldn't mind working on their security. So that had been part of the reason. The other part was because I wanted to have a client I could point to and say I was helping him with a personal problem, something that would make Jade proud. My thoughts drifted back to her, and I tried to imagine her life in Colorado. Was she seeing someone? We'd called things off when she left. Not that we'd ever classified our relationship, but we had spent a lot of time together, mostly in the hospital and physical therapy. After what she'd been through, she had trust issues, particularly when it came to men. Despite everything, she barely trusted me, so I doubted she was with anyone else. It had only been a few months, but a lot could happen in a few months. Pussy, I muttered. The gray-haired woman 2 seats away looked up. Shithead. I winked at her, which caused her to emit an exasperated huff. That was a sign I should get back to business and keep my internal musings to myself. So I went back to work. Knox's deleted browser history showed plenty of research for work, a dabbling into the realm of naked women, and lots of sports searches. He'd even been on several sportsbook websites. Going back into my Dropbox, I checked to see if Justin uploaded Knox's financial statements. With the frequency Knox visited these sites and other gambling pages, he must have spent some money. A gentle hand touched my shoulder, and I turned, knowing what I would find. Hey, stranger. Jade trailed her fingers down my bicep as she circled around the chair. Before she even had the chance to get in front of me, I was on my feet with my phone shoved into my pocket. In my haste, I knocked the bag on the floor, and we both bent down to pick it up, nearly colliding in the process. Scooping it up, I straightened. How was your flight? You look good. Beautiful. Her hair was the same fiery red. It cascaded around her face in smooth waves, contrasting nicely with her alabaster skin. The few freckles on her nose were more pronounced, as if she'd been spending time outdoors, and her green eyes were a clear aquamarine. My gaze drifted to her lips. Should I kiss her? Hug her? I'd always let her take the lead on these things, so I held the bag tightly in front of me to keep from doing something we'd both regret. The flight was fine. She studied the bag, searching for something else to focus on besides me. Were you waiting long? Not really. So, you shop here often? On occasion. Her lips quirked up in the corners. She was teasing me. I just traveled 3,000 miles, and this is how you greet me? I grinned. Fuck it. I took her in my arms and squeezed her tight. I missed you. I breathed against her ear. Ditto. Her hands ran along my shoulder blades, stopping near the base on the left side to avoid the bullet wound, while the other continued all the way up to the top of my shoulder. She pulled me against her, and I felt her lips brush my neck. I pulled back just far enough so we could kiss, and it was like she never left. After we were both breathless, she pulled away, turning her head down and to the side. Her cheeks were almost as red as her hair. My God,
We're the ending to every rom-com known to man. Kissing in an airport. Could we be any more cliché?
I don't mind. I missed you.
You already said that.
Yeah, well, it needed to be said twice. She shrugged out of my grip, so I ran one hand through my hair and held the bag out to her. She took it from me and peered inside.
Really? You got me an I Love New York t-shirt, a big cookie, and a chocolate bar?
It's Swiss.
My favorite.
Is it? She rolled her eyes.
You can't fool me, Lucien. I have your number.
In that case, you should use it more often. Her gaze dropped to the floor. I was only joking. I nodded toward the luggage carousel. Are you ready to get your stuff and get out of here?
Yes, please.
Before she could lead the way to the carousel, the gray-haired woman mumbled something to her I didn't catch. Jade laughed.
That's not possible.
The woman looked utterly offended and gave me the stink eye as I made my way past her. Once we were at the carousel, Jade asked,
What did you do to that poor old woman?
Nothing. I was talking to myself, and she took offense and called me something very unladylike. I narrowed my eyes at her, but she kept hers glued to the conveyor belt. What did she say to you?
She said I could do better.
I watched the luggage spin around in front of us as men and women grabbed rolling bags and duffels. She isn't wrong.
Yes, she is.
Jade reached for her bag and hefted it off the carousel before it could spin past. She dropped it to the floor and extended the handle.
I'd know, don't you think?
A bitterness crept into her voice, along with that fierce defiance that had been the strength she needed to survive. I reached for her bag. May I?
If you insist.
Where would you like to go for dinner? She hooked her arm through mine and rested her cheek against my shoulder. The scent of her shampoo, vanilla and citrus, overpowered the plane and airport smell.
Can we order in? I just want to go home and take a shower.
Home. My ears perked up at the word. Was she back for good? I didn't dare ask. Sure, whatever you want. You know that. We were quiet for most of the drive back to my place. She stared out the window, taking in the city as if she'd never seen it before. She'd been here for years, since college, but it must look different now after being away. I considered asking her about Colorado and her mom, but decided against it. Hope was a 4-letter word. I didn't dare risk bursting that bubble, not after the kiss at the airport. Except I wasn't a patient man, no matter how hard I tried. Penny for your thoughts? I used the fob to gain access to the parking garage beneath my building.
I miss it. The city, being here, being with you.
She turned in the seat to face me.
I probably shouldn't say things like that.
Afraid you're going to inflate my ego? I turned to look at her. Because that ship's already sailed, but if it makes you feel any better, I miss being with you too.
Stop that.
Her features hardened, but her eyes looked sad.
We are not reenacting any more rom-com moments. Life isn't always a happy ending, Lucien.
Pulling into my assigned spot, I killed the engine. What's wrong? What happened?
Nothing.
She sighed and stared out the windshield.
I just don't think women like me get to have the fairy tale ending. My prince doesn't get to slay the dragon and take me off to his palace to live happily ever after.
It's not a palace, it's just an apartment with a good view. I understand why you might be confused. What I didn't understand was why she was talking like this, or why she felt it necessary to stomp all over my heart. But I reminded myself we weren't together. Seeing me must be hard for her too. Like not seeing me. As usual, I figured it was best to give her space. You still get to have a happily ever after. You make that on your own. That has nothing to do with me unless you want it to. She bit her lip.
Are you sure it's okay I'm staying here? Mary Beth said I could crash with her and her new roommate.
I'd like you to stay with me, but whatever you want. I can make a few calls, get you a hotel room if that's easier. I opened the car door, grabbed the grocery bags from the back seat, and went to the trunk to take out her luggage. It's up to you, whatever makes you comfortable.
You make me comfortable.
She grabbed the grocery bags from my hand.
Just stop treating me like a princess or someone who's too fragile to do anything. That's not me. Not anymore.
You're not fragile, Jade. You never were. You're the strongest, fiercest person I know.
Do you really think so?
Absolutely. I pressed the button for the elevator and we stepped inside. Again my hand went through my hair, and she laughed. What?
You still have that nervous habit. I guess that's my fault. This is really awkward, right? We talk on the phone every few weeks, so I don't get why this feels so weird.
I have no idea. But I knew why. When we spoke on the phone, it was basic small talk. We discussed work and the weather. We kept things light. When she said she was coming back to the city, she didn't go into any details. We never discussed us, or what her visit would mean.
Maybe it's true what they say,
She mused.
Maybe you can't go home again.
To Colorado? She shook her head.
I want to talk to you about some stuff. I might need your help, but let's have dinner first. I'm starving.
Sure. But her words worried me. What are you in the mood for?
Everything.
Chapter 5.
Lucien, how long do you think I'm staying?
She stared at the liquor and treats I'd stockpiled for her return. Forever. I cringed at the voice inside my head. No, forever was not a good answer, or a good thought. That was a one-way ticket to Crazy Town, and Jade had already had more than her fair share of psychos. I picked up the box of tea bags. They were out of the 20 count. 100 was the smallest box they had. I'll take whatever you don't use to the office. It's not a big deal. Gloria would probably prefer if you don't touch any of the cookies or chocolates. She has quite the sweet tooth.
Gloria?
Jade cocked an eyebrow at me. My receptionist?
Oh.
Her green eyes held an uncertain look.
I thought she might be your girlfriend.
I wouldn't have kissed you like that if I had a girlfriend.
Right.
She appeared deep in thought.
What about casually? Are you seeing anyone?
Does it matter? She shook her head, her expression exaggerated in the same way my mother used to look at me when she wanted me to volunteer information without having to ask.
Nope.
Good. I reached for the bottle of wine. For the record, the answer is no. I'm not seeing anyone.
Not since I left?
No. Her lip twitched, as if trying to squelch a smile. My answer pleased her, even if she'd never admit it.
You should date. Go out. Meet people. Have fun.
What about you?
What about me?
Come on, Jade, don't be a buster. Answer the question. It's only fair.
Since when do you play fair?
Her eyes twinkled. She found this amusing, but turned away before I could ask anything else, and walked across the kitchen and into the living room.
Your apartment looks the same.
Do you think I should redecorate? She shrugged, and I realized this was to buy time to avoid talking about whatever topic was actually on her mind. What's going on? I asked. Why did you make this trip? She picked up the glass orb from my coffee table and studied the colored patterns inside.
How's work? Have you been helping the helpless and fighting the good fight?
It's been mostly corporate security gigs.
I thought you had grander plans.
I do. It just takes time. I can't exactly privatize policing and save the downtrodden without clients, capital, and a positive reputation. Cross-security and investigation needs to be on the map to have a reputation for professionalism and excellence. Right now, the only people who know me were around for my previous career.
And the shooting.
That was barely a blip on anyone's radar. That was the point of the settlement. The police wanted to keep it quiet. They didn't parade me around or accuse me of murdering a cop, so I was just a random victim of a violent crime. No one knows about it. My name didn't even make the papers. Anger made her cheeks flush.
It wasn't random. Scott abducted me. He was going to kill me. If you hadn't...
I know, but I can't talk about it publicly. You know that. Was that the reason she came back to town? Did she plan to go to the press and tell them what happened? Part of me hoped she would. But I knew Mr. Almeida, my attorney, would see things differently. If she went public, my involvement would get out, which could hurt my reputation and my company. But I didn't care. It was Jade's story. I'd back her decision no matter what, even if I couldn't afford to be sued for violating a gag order. Are you planning on making this public knowledge?
No, it's done. I told you that before I left. Maybe one day I'll come forward, but not today. Victims get crucified in the press. I don't want that. I don't want to become fodder for the talking heads or a joke on late-night TV. What I want to do is help others like me. And I can't do that with reporters and crazies hounding me at every step.
Did something happen in Colorado?
No, it's great. It's not the city, but it's okay. My mom and I are getting reacquainted, which is good. I missed her.
But you needed a break? Her green eyes stared at me with that helpless look of desperation that I'd seen when we first met. That look could make me crumble.
I need a plan.
Anything. Tell me how I can help.
You can't. I just had to come back and get some stuff together. I'm going back to school.
Really? She'd be back in the city. We could pick up where we left off. I fought to keep from smiling. This thought obviously had her upset, so I had to be sensitive to that.
Yeah, and I need Mary Beth to write me a letter of recommendation and help me fill out the application.
Your roommate?
She was more than that. In some ways, she saved me almost as much as you did. She does a lot for the battered women's shelter here. I want her input on what I should include in my essay and what to avoid.
She pulled her gaze from the spot on the floor she'd been staring at since the conversation started. You'll need money for tuition, books, and housing. I reached for my phone and opened my banking app. I told you I set aside the money from the settlement for you. That's your account. Graduate school, or post-grad, since she already had a master's degree, can be expensive. Let me transfer more from the investment account into your bank account. How much do you think you'll need?
I don't want your money, Lucien. You've already done enough.
Nonsense. I've done nothing. The only reason I received the settlement was because of the hell you endured. It should be yours. All of it.
No. It's blood money. Yours. Mine. His.
She shook her head vehemently.
I don't want it.
It can be used for good. It should be used for good.
Aren't you using it for good?
I'm trying. But I doubted my corporate clients counted in her eyes. Hopefully, Trey Knox's case counted.
Keep the money. I just need a place to crash while I get all of this together.
You can stay as long as you need.
I fly back in 2 days.
That's not long.
No, it's not.
She sucked in some air. I picked up on the physical cues almost instantly. Are you okay? She nodded, swallowing.
My therapist said it'd be hard returning to the city. Lots of bad memories, lots of trauma and baggage that I still need to unpack, so to speak.
You didn't seem this apprehensive before you left.
It's worse coming back. It's like muscle memory, but it's not just that. Seeing you is hard too. I really do miss you, Lucien. You're the one regret I have.
I'm sorry. I should have done more. I wish I'd figured out a way to stop him.
No, not that. Leaving you. I thought by now you'd have moved on, but you haven't. I wish you would. This is burying me. It shouldn't bury you, too.
Jade?
I hate this.
She turned to stare at me.
I hate that I'm still so afraid. I thought when I moved away the nightmares would stop. That I wouldn't find myself staring out the window, half expecting to see him lurking in the shadows across the street or waiting for me when I get home from work. Isn't that crazy? He's dead. I know it, but I still can't shake it. I just want to feel safe again.
Is that why you decided to take this trip? I didn't need her answer. It was obvious. She didn't turn, but her head bobbed.
Leaving was stupid. It didn't solve anything.
What can I do?
Nothing. This is something I have to work on. My therapist thinks coming back to the city and confronting the memories and my demons might help. Mary Beth agreed.
You're going to be okay. It just takes time
and help. But you're right. I will be okay.
Would you like some tea? We have plenty. She laughed.
That would be nice.
I filled the kettle, turning to find her standing beside me at the counter. We didn't speak, but she stood close enough that her side brushed against mine. I should have done more to help her. The kettle let out a shrill whistle. Exhaling, she turned off the burner. After filling her mug, she put the kettle back on the stove. I placed the honey beside her and took a spoon out of the drawer. She took it from my hand and our fingertips brushed. So, you're going back to school. What are you thinking? Doctor? Lawyer?
I want to face my fears head on. I'm thinking social work.
Really? That surprised me, even though it shouldn't have. That job could be dangerous, and she'd have to work closely with police officers in some instances. Domestic abuse was a common issue social workers faced. This seemed wrong on every level imaginable. There are plenty of ways to give back. You could do something else.
No, this is what I'm meant to do.
She squeezed a large dollop of honey into her cup and stirred it with the spoon.
Scott took my joy, my independence, and now that I'm finally free, I'm afraid I'll run into another Scott. But these women are already dealing with men just as bad or worse. Someone has to help them. I understand what they're going through, so it should be me."
"Are you sure?"
"Yes."
But she didn't sound sure. "You have time."
"I know. That's what school and therapy are for."
She spun, nearly shoulder-checking me in the process.
"How do you cope? How can you go to work and take cases knowing any one of them could be your last?"
"Gin. Lots of gin."
"Lucien, be serious."
"Fine. If you must know, the first thing I did was take a page out of your book. After that, I stopped thinking about it. If necessary, I force myself not to think about it. It won't serve me to dwell. It's over."
"It's that simple?"
"Most of the time. If not, there's always booze." I held up my glass. "Cheers." She picked up her teacup and clinked glasses with me. After savoring a few sips of the chamomile tea, she eyed me curiously.
"What do you mean you took a page out of my book?"
Chapter 6. She traced her fingertip along the outline of the angel's left wing.
"This must have taken forever."
35 hours. It was a lot of line work, no shading, and very few things filled in. I'd been considering going back to add more details, but the pain held little appeal.
"Are you insane?"
"Are you?" I asked. "The leopard on your leg took almost as long, and you did that before you even fully healed. I'm surprised the tattoo artist let you get away with that."
"I couldn't deal with the scars. I wanted something fierce, something protective."
"So did I." She pressed her lips against my spine above the ink. She knew, despite the tattoo, the scars were still tender.
"You got the angel of death tattooed on your back, Lucien? How is that protective?"
"I'm not sure if it's my spirit animal or whatever, but it was only fitting." I watched her over my shoulder as she gently traced the lines that concealed the scars hidden beneath. Since the angels had such a firm grasp on me that day, I figured I might as well embrace it. What do you think? She ran her fingers down the angel's body and off to the side, tracing the one extended wing. She circled around to my front where the tattoo ended at the end of the bullet graze.
"You should have mentioned it during one of our conversations."
"Surprise." She gave my shoulder a shove.
"What's the point of keeping in touch when you don't tell me what's going on with you?"
I could say the same thing, but I didn't want to start a fight. "Didn't I offer to send you some shirtless photos?"
"Yes, but I thought—"
She blushed.
Did Kai do yours too?"
"Uh-huh. Until Jade had gotten a tattoo to cover her scars, I'd never considered getting anything this extensive. I had a small one on my chest, the result of a drunken dare, but this was different. It had taken 3.5 months and 9 sessions to get it done.
"Did it hurt?"
I didn't feel it in most places."
"And some places were excruciating,"
she said knowingly. Her hands ran up my chest.
"I did say you were my guardian angel. I guess this proves it."
"I thought you told me I was a fallen angel."
"Is that why you got the tattoo?"
I shrugged. "I missed you."
"You keep saying that."
She looked up at me from beneath her lashes.
"What would have happened if I stayed? Would you still have gone through with this?"
"Probably." I cleared my throat, uncomfortable with the question and unwilling to move when she was standing so close, touching me. Even the slightest twitch could cause her to retreat, and I didn't want that. "You could have come with me and kept me company. If you don't like angels, you could have talked me into getting something else."
"A giant panda bear."
"A panda bear?"
"They're cute and cuddly."
"I thought we were going for fierce and powerful."
"You shielded me with your body. You're already fierce and powerful. You didn't need a tattoo to prove you're a badass."
"You think I'm a badass?"
"Shut up."
She took a step back, and I fought to keep from reaching her.
"You didn't answer my question. What would have happened if I never left? Would we be dating? Would you be my boyfriend? Would we live together?"
"Don't you think we might be rushing into things?"
"We slept together for months, but what? We would just hook up from time to time?"
"Jade, our first night together might have been a hookup, but it meant more to me than that. Despite everything, the next few months we spent together, recovering, healing, that wasn't something casual. You mean too much to me to be a fling." I turned and reached for my shirt and pulled my arms through the sleeves.
"You never said anything."
"What was there to say? You needed to get away from here. I wasn't going to stop you. Long distance wouldn't have worked. It's not fair to either of us. Not when I'm here and you're there. She pressed her palms against my cheeks.
Say it.
She grasped my hands as I tried to button my shirt.
I need you to say it.
I wish you never left. Is that what you want to hear? With a sad smile, she stood on her tiptoes and kissed me.
That's all I needed to know.
Then she took my hand and pulled me toward the bedroom. Hugging the pillow beneath my arm, I faced Jade. Her fingers had found their way to the ink on my back.
What would you like for breakfast? I asked. I'm still on Colorado time. My body thinks it's 4 a.m.
Okay. I leaned over and gently kissed her. I'll try to be quiet. Go back to sleep. She grabbed my arm before I could get out of bed.
Are you going to work today?
I'm sorry, honey. I have a few meetings I can't miss and some research I need to do for a client, but I'll have Justin cancel my afternoon. By the time you wake up, I should be back.
Don't do that. I'm meeting Mary Beth for lunch, and I have to swing by the university to get copies of my transcripts. I probably won't be here most of the day. I don't want my visit to disrupt your life. You should do whatever you have to do.
How about we have dinner? I climbed out of bed and opened one of my drawers, searching for my spare apartment key. We could go to the Mexican place you like.
I was thinking Chinese.
That works too. I pulled out the key and placed it on the bedside table. I can leave my car if you need transportation.
Lucien, what did I say yesterday?
Right. Sorry. I put the key down. Here's the apartment key. Feel free to come and go as you please. If you have any problems, you have my cell number.
And the office, and Justin's cell.
She shut her eyes and let out a little moan. Jade? But I chickened out of saying what was on my mind. I'll see you tonight. While my internal voice berated and belittled my cowardly ways, I showered. The water stung my back, and when I dried off, I found a few smears of red. Turning to the mirror, I ignored the pinch and laughed at the scratches Jade had left on my back. She'd been careful not to put her hands anywhere tender, which was good, since she hadn't taken it easy on me. When would we find our even keel? Last night she said we should hook up whenever we were in the same time zone, but from the way she said it, I wondered when that would be. If she were going back to school, wouldn't she be moving back to the city? Or was she applying elsewhere? Maybe she didn't want to go to her alma mater, the place that had led her to Scott. I had to stop. This was ridiculous. I wasn't some love-struck teen. I was Lucien fucking Cross. And I loved her. The thought shocked me, mostly because I'd never realized it until now. I didn't want her to leave again. She should stay. But that wasn't my decision. It had to be hers. Colorado had been the right choice, but maybe she would come back. But the voice in the back of my head knew the truth. Once I was dressed, I left the apartment, making sure it was locked and my security system was armed. She knew the codes, so I wasn't worried. On my way to the office, I grabbed breakfast for everyone. As usual, I was the first to arrive at work. I left the bag of bagels in the break room, made coffee, snagged a cinnamon raisin, and went into my office. I didn't have much scheduled for today since I planned to spend it with Jade, but now that I had extra time on my hands and Trey Knox needed help, I might as well pick up where I left off.
Morning,
Justin called. A moment later, he came into my office holding half an everything bagel while he squeezed cream cheese onto it.
You brought a bag of comfort food for breakfast? That's never good. How was your night?
I gave him a look. Not good? He asked around a mouthful. Let's just get to work.
Whatever you say, boss.
Chapter 7. Trey Knox liked sports, and he liked to bet on sports. That had led to a chunk of his credit card debt, but he'd stopped using the online sportsbook sites several months ago. His credit cards weren't maxed out, and his more recent expenses involved buying more items for his collection. Did they have a support group for obsessed sports fans? I didn't know, nor did I care. That was Knox's problem. I had enough of my own. The sportsbook sites he visited were automated transactions. No forums, no message boards, no interactions. I didn't have to worry that someone targeted him from there, which left all the auction and store sites. This is going to take forever. I resisted the urge to get another cup of coffee. I already had a headache, which the last cup of espresso exacerbated. Instead, I popped a few aspirin and grabbed a bottle of water. Maybe I needed to hydrate. Pressing the intercom button, I said, "Justin, what did you find on the auction houses?"
The physical ones?
Yes.
No other reported problems. I'm still working on background checks, but so far everything's been inconclusive. They don't hire ex-cons.
Okay, what about the delivery drivers?
Knox picked everything up personally. Nothing was ever delivered.
I crossed that off my list. I'll look into the security firm that installed his home security system while you finish up the auction houses. I already reached out to area pawn shops and posted a few listings on the dark web for anyone who could fence these items.
Do you think you'll get a bite?
We'll see. Opening a new tab, I went to the security firm's website, reading every bit of information they had listed on their home security systems, performed several other searches, and found an online video tutorial on how to bypass the system. That meant any idiot could have broken into Knox's house. At least I knew it had to be a 3-man team, at the very least. Returning to the security firm's website, I searched for a list of employees, but they didn't broadcast that information. So I did some more digging until I found a roster of names. 3 of their tech consultants had records for B&E and 1 for armed robbery. I checked their criminal records, but those hadn't been home invasions. They'd been high-end heists. Obviously, these reformed cons had gotten positions in the company by assessing the security system's weaknesses. I'd keep them on my radar, but they'd been on the straight and narrow for too long. And given what they were making at the company, stealing Knox's collection wouldn't be worth it. They stood to lose far more than what they could gain, but I had to perform my due diligence, so I checked their business records for other security systems that had been installed and cross-referenced them to reported break-ins. Nothing lined up. Knox was the only person with that particular security system who had suffered a break-in within the last 2 years. Scribbling down their names, I did a quick social media search, checked their known associates, and texted Knox their names and photos to see if he recognized any of them. A moment later, my phone rang. "Cross Security and Investigations," I answered, my focus on the computer screen in front of me.
"Do you think these men are responsible?"
Knox asked. "Mr. Knox." I never expected him to call back so soon. "I'm just checking into every possibility. Do you recognize any of them?"
"No. Should I?"
"That's not how this works. The only answer I expect is an honest one." According to the records I'd seen, the security system had already been installed before Knox moved in. He had no reason to interact with these men unless one of them had targeted him.
"No, I've never seen any of them before."
"Thanks."
"Does this mean you're making progress?"
"Leaps and bounds," I deadpanned, already on to a more thorough analysis of the forums Knox frequented. "While I have you, what can you tell me about trade shows?"
"They're great."
Swallowing an exasperated sigh, I asked, "Do you go to them often?"
"Every chance I get."
"You must have interacted with tons of other sports fans. Did you ever tell them about your collection or recent acquisitions?"
"Of course."
"Did you ever exchange names or contact information?"
"With a few guys."
"I'll need that. Did you invite any of them back to your house?"
"No, it was more like, I'll let you know if I stumble upon that signed rookie card if you keep an eye out for the championship game ball."
"Did any of them keep in touch?"
"A few. We usually meet for drinks to exchange merchandise or to catch a game."
"All right. Send me their contact information. Do you always go to the same bar?"
"Yep. McGinty's."
A sports bar. I wasn't surprised. Adding that to my list of places to visit, I asked Knox the few questions I'd come up with while at the airport last night, but he didn't have any private messaging apps on his phone. "You don't date?"
"How is that any of your business?"
"It isn't, but I'm curious."
"I meet plenty of women. Plenty."
He exaggerated the word the second time he said it.
"I'm more of a one-and-done kind of guy."
"You don't take them back to your place?"
"Nope."
"May I ask why not?"
"They want to stay the night. They use my toothbrush. They want to get breakfast and plan a second date. One chick even wanted to plan our wedding. It's awkward when I have to kick them out to go to work in the morning. There's always a scene. It's just better to love them and leave them, am I right?"
Though I shared several of Knox's views, at least when it came to picking up random women, hearing him say it bothered me.
"Uh-huh. So I go to them."
"Were you with someone when your house was broken into?" According to the police report, it happened around 10 p.m. No, I was at work. Acquisitions involves a lot of overseas calls and dealing with different time zones. I work late a lot. Okay, that marked another possibility off my list. I have to go, Knox said. Good luck. I hope you find my stuff soon. I'm dying to get that ring back. He hung up before I had a chance to respond. All right, so he didn't subscribe to a dating app. He didn't invite random women into his house. From what I gathered, Knox didn't do anything that would make him an easy target. He didn't broadcast his location or habits. The only thing he did was talk a lot about his cool toys in online forums and to other die-hard fans. That could be troublesome, but his name was common enough. No one should have been able to find his house and plan the perfect heist that way. But someone did, and that someone brought an entire crew with him. After staring at the screen for several more minutes without having brilliance strike, I got up and went into the outer office. I'm going to the precinct to see if the responding officers can tell me anything that isn't in the file.
All right, I'll let Mr. Almeida know he should be prepared to bail you out of jail.
Justin reached for the phone. Why? I shook my head. Never mind. If you dig up something concrete, text me the details.
Will do.
Chapter 8. Hey, Sarah. I ran my hand over the edge of the counter. Lucien? Sergeant Sarah Rostakowski looked up from her spot behind the desk and automatically tucked a piece of gray hair behind her ear. It's good to see you, kid. She studied me. Are you good? You look good. I'm good. Really? She glanced around to make sure the other cops working intake could handle the phones while she came around to the side. It's nice to see you upright and walking again. Yeah. I stared at the posters on the walls. Thanks for bringing food over and visiting me in the hospital. No, of course, it's the least I could do. She reached for me. Is it okay if I hug you? I laughed. You've known me my entire life. Since when do you have to ask? I didn't want to. She gave me a gentle hug and pulled back. Are you staying out of trouble? Trying. But you're here. Do I want to know why? A client hired me to recover his stolen property. Did he file a police report? Yep. She returned to her spot behind the desk. Okay, give me the details. I gave her the location and date. Before I could give her the case number, she pulled it up. It's still under investigation. Obviously. I want to talk to the responding officer and whoever's primary and see if they have anything to add. And you think this is a good idea? I snorted. Why? Are you afraid another cop is going to shoot me? Lucien. Yeah, I know. I slapped my hand over my mouth. She shook her head. Let me check and see who's around that you can talk to. Thanks, Sarah. I moved away from the desk and took a seat near the front door. A few officers glared at me from where they were working intake. I'd always had a reputation, first as the commissioner's washed-out son, then as a troublemaker who got out of assault and destruction of property charges because his daddy pulled strings, and now as a cop killer. No wonder Justin said he'd tell Almeida to expect a call. I'd be lucky to get out of this station in one piece. Lucien? Sarah said, distracting me from giving the officers my most potent death stare. Officer Gallo will be out in a sec to talk with you. Thanks. A few moments later, a career patrolman turned a corner. Lucien Cross? That'd be me. He cocked one eyebrow up and gave me a thorough once-over. Joe Gallo. He held out his hand, but his eyes didn't hold malice. He seemed intrigued, possibly even pleased, to meet me. I've crossed paths with your old man several times over the years. He's one of the good ones. Sure. Gallo didn't know dear old Dad the way I did. He always brags about his boy. It's nice to meet you. What can I do for you? I want to ask you a few things about a recent break-in. I gave him Knox's address. Gallo nodded a few times. Yeah, that was a week ago. Week and a half. I remember it well. The security firm didn't alert us. The owner did. The system had been taken apart from the control boxes, and the owner's valuables had been cleaned out. But most of the house was pristine. What do you mean, most? He led me into an empty room off to the side and closed the door. Break-ins are usually messy. Wires hanging all over the place from where the TV and electronics got yanked, broken glass, tossed drawers, ripped furniture. But this place didn't have any of the usual telltale signs of a break-in. It was clean. Not a lot of damage to report. I removed the copy of the police report Knox had given me from my breast pocket. Just a busted bathroom mirror, right?
That was it,
Gallo read over my shoulder.
The pieces had red paint on them, like somebody spray-painted them, but I don't know for sure.
There's no mention of that.
The owner said it was decorative.
Spray paint's decorative.
No, he said the mirror had a red design etched on it, and that's what we were seeing. Didn't look like it to me, but he was so distraught about his stolen stuff, I didn't want to press and make matters worse. You working for the guy?
Trey Knox.
Yeah, he was nearly in tears over losing his shit.
Gallo chuckled.
I'm not used to seeing grown men acting like that. He acted like the big kid snatched the juice box right out of his hand.
I glared at Gallo. Isn't that what happened?
The officer held up his palms. Hey, I'm on your side here. I want to get this guy's stuff back and find the bastards who did this. That's my job. Any help you can provide is a plus in my book.
Narrowing my eyes, I wondered if he had known what recently transpired, or if he wanted to be my pal because of his prior connection to my father, a.k.a. his boss. Perhaps the gag order had gone both ways, but I didn't have time to worry about it now. Mr. Knox didn't hire me to help you do your job. He hired me to recover his property.
I hope you can.
Officer Gallo reached into his wallet and pulled out a card.
When you find your stuff, give me a call. I doubt this is the first time this crew is struck.
He leaned in and lowered his voice.
Off the record, this isn't the first break-in in that area. It could be the same crew. We're working to stop them now.
It's not the same crew.
How can you be sure?
Different M.O. Whoever broke into Knox's place disassembled the security system. They didn't cut some wires or trigger it. They took it apart.
We already looked into the home security people, but they're clean.
I know.
You look too?
Somebody has to make sure the job's getting done. I resisted the urge to crumple up his business card and toss it on the floor. Officer Gallo might be a good cop, or a wolf in sheep's clothing. I didn't know enough about him to make a judgment call either way, but as a rule I didn't trust any of them. I hadn't in a long time, and given my history, that wasn't about to change any time soon.
Glad you're on it.
Gallo winked at me and put a firm hand on my shoulder.
You're making your pops proud.
I tried not to let those words irritate me as I left the precinct and headed to the first of many pawn shops. Even though they had policies against dealing in stolen merchandise, I'd done enough checking to determine the least reputable. I'd start there and make my way down the list. My best bet was to pose as a buyer. I had the car, watch, and suit to let them know I was serious and wasn't a cop. The police didn't dress this nicely. I'd been assured of that fact only a few moments ago. When I entered the first store, with the bars over the windows, I wondered if I should have entered armed. The guy behind the counter looked like a barrel. The black hair sticking up on his shoulders from underneath his wife-beater were almost thick enough to carpet my hardwood floors. He turned with a permanent angry expression on his face.
Buying or selling?
His eyes came to rest on my watch. Buying, I hope. I tugged on my sleeve and straightened my cufflink. Do you have any sports memorabilia?
Yeah, sure.
He led me over to a display counter of photographs, jerseys, and game balls.
Anything specific?
I browsed the display, but none of it matched the items stolen from Knox's collection. None of this is quite right. I'm looking for a gift for my boss. Maybe a championship ring or something.
I got these.
The guy opened a locked cabinet behind him and pulled out a row of rings that looked like they belonged to famous rappers. No, I sighed. I was hoping for a specific item. I gave him the details on the ring, but he didn't have one.
What about something else?
I rattled off a few of the pricier items from Knox's collection, but he didn't have anything in stock. I'd be willing to pay through the nose if you could get your hands on this ring. I'm looking to make partner, and with my boss's birthday coming up, this is the perfect opportunity. If you could get your hands on it, I'd pay you 50% over the asking price. The guy just shrugged.
Sorry, this is all I got. I don't do a lot of sports shit in here.
The store had mostly electronics, knives, and guns.
Check out Paulie's Pawn. They might have what you want.
Thanks. Chapter 9. Paulie's Pawn looked like most discount stores, not a pawn shop. The place was huge. Rows of everything from knockoff Gucci bags to designer sunglasses to ancient weaponry filled the locked cases and shelves. Yet the clientele inside the pawn shop made me uneasy. Several rough-looking men were clustered around the back wall, which had racks of mounted weaponry and cases of bullets, blades, and what appeared to be grenades. The friendlier items were closer to the front. I meandered the aisles, checking out the tablets and computers. Any one of them could have belonged to Trey Knox, but that'd be next to impossible to determine without checking serial numbers.
Can I help you?
A woman popped her gum and studied me with mild indifference. The wrinkles around her mouth told me she smoked, probably a pack a day, given the harshness to her voice. Giving her a winning smile, I approached the counter where she stood. I'm shopping for a specialty item for my boss. He's a big sports fan.
What sport?
All of them. I told her about the MVP ring I was hoping to acquire. She whistled.
Have you tried eBay?
I couldn't find one.
They're hard to come by. Anything else on this guy's wish list?
How about a World Series pennant signed by all the players? She scratched her head.
Let's see.
She led me to a section of the store I hadn't browsed yet.
We might have a few more things in the back. Look around while I check.
Sure, thanks. I crouched down to get a closer look inside the display case while watching her unlock a door and step into the back. Something about this didn't feel right. I straightened and leaned over the glass to get a better look at a few signed game balls, noticing the two men nodding in my direction. I shifted, wondering if they'd noticed the bulge at the back of my jacket. After my visit to the previous pawn shop, I'd decided it was best to enter these establishments armed, as long as they didn't have metal detectors. The men went back to their conversation, but they kept one eye on me. Perhaps one apex predator had simply sensed another apex predator, but I wasn't delusional enough to think of myself as an apex predator. They probably noticed my watch and cufflinks and figured they'd mug me on my way out.
Yo,
the woman called to me.
I found this in the back.
She held it up, and I studied it carefully. Do you have a certificate of authenticity or anything like that? Her eyes went wide, and she popped her gum again.
Do you want it or not?
I nodded down at the triangular piece of fabric. How much?
$25.
Dollars?
100.
I gave it another look. Let me think about it for a minute. I pointed at a hockey puck inside the display case. Can I see that? She let out a huff, practically rolling her eyes at the inconvenience.
Which one?
On your left. She pulled it out of the case and placed it on top of the glass. Picking it up, I checked to see if it had the same scuff mark on the side that Knox's had, but it did not. Stepping back, I examined the pennant again. I'll give you $1,800.
22.
I let out a sigh. Fine. Do you take credit cards? She nodded, picking up the pennant and carrying it to the register. We passed the men, who looked away as I approached, but once I was past them, their eyes were back on me. Ignoring them, I examined the other items on the wall and in the display case near the register. Do you think you might get a championship ring in? That would really cinch things for me.
This won't do it?
Nope.
Rings are hard to find. They get expensive. Tens of thousands.
I know. I watched her carefully. I'm prepared to drop $75,000 on it. She nearly choked.
Are you serious?
Has a heart attack.
Where do you work?
An investment bank. The partner buy-in is almost $250. Another $75 to make sure I don't get skipped over again is worth it. She put the pennant into a large flat box and slid it across the counter.
Check back next week. We're supposed to be getting some new stock in on Thursday.
Great. Thanks. Lifting the flat box off the counter, I kept it horizontal as I made my way to the front door. The two men remained in the store as I unlocked the trunk and put the box inside. I couldn't be sure this was part of Knox's stolen collection, but it'd be easier to verify at the office than in the middle of a pawn shop. Before pulling away, I made a few calls. While I was on the phone, one of the men left the shop. He walked past my car and continued down the street. Beneath his jacket was a concealed handgun. Whether that had been a recent purchase, I didn't know. Perhaps he had planned to knock over the pawn shop until I showed up, but I didn't think that was the case either. The first thing I had to do was determine if this place was hawking Knox's collection, and if they were, I had to find out who sold it to them. The lady said a new shipment was coming in on Thursday, but everything I knew about pawn shops didn't indicate they received shipments. Items came and went, as did the customers. Some people just wanted cash, but if they were getting shipments, The thieves might be unloading their wares on a regular basis. Phoning Justin, I gave him the store name and address and told him to run the business and everyone associated with it. Then I made a quick detour back to the police station. This time I didn't go inside. I stayed in my car and called Sarah to ask what she knew about Paulie's pawn. "We've busted them a couple times for selling stolen property," she said. "But we've busted all the stores a time or two." "Is there anything else you can tell me?" "No, sorry, they aren't on the radar." "All right, thanks." "You just left a couple of hours ago. You can't seriously have a lead already." "I never said I did." "Just be careful, Lucien." "What fun would that be?" Hanging up, I was glad I didn't waste a trip inside. The only reason I made the call from the parking lot was in case they had open files that I'd want to sneak a peek at. But they didn't. Once I got back to the office, I laid the signed fabric out on my desk, scanned it in, and blew up the photograph Knox had provided. I placed one image on top of the other. The signatures lined up perfectly. Every swirl, dot, and line hit precisely.
"They're numbered,"
Justin said from the doorway. "What?"
"In the bottom corner. They do that on some collector's items."
Justin watched me compare the number to the info on Knox's certificate of authenticity.
"Does that belong to our client?"
"Yes."
"That's a new record for you. Solving a case in 24 hours.
"It's far from solved. This is just one part of his collection. I didn't see anything else." Another thought hit me. What if the thieves had spread Knox's collection out over several stores? It'd be harder to track them down that way. But the way the woman told me to come back for the ring made me think she knew where it was, which meant she might know where the rest of Knox's collection was being held. "What did you find on Paulie's pawn?"
"Step into my office and I'll show you."
Justin stepped back into the outer office.
"Oh, wait, not my office, the reception area."
I gave his shoulder a shove for good measure while he brought up the info he'd ascertained. "What do we know about Lenmere LLC?"
"Filings look good. They have a few holdings, Paulie's, a self-storage center, and another pawn shop. Both pawn shops have received citations and fines. The owner's clean, no criminal record, just plenty of moving citations."
"Who owns it?"
"Dimitri Lenmere. He's 62. This is his second act. He used to drive a taxi, retired, and bought a few shops. From what I gather, he's hands-off."
"All right." I stared at the screen. No B&Es in his past. "Did you find any known associates with a history of break-ins?"
"Nothing, but cabbies meet a lot of people."
"That's a stretch." Justin pulled Dimitri's driver's license. He didn't live in the city anymore. If he was still driving a cab, I'd have wondered if he and Knox had crossed paths, and if Knox had bragged to him about his collection. But that couldn't be the case.
"What do you want me to do?"
Justin asked. "Run Dimitri's name and photo by Knox. I'm guessing our client doesn't know this guy from a hole in the wall." I rubbed my hand over my mouth. We were hired to find and retrieve Knox's property, not figure out who took it or why. That being said, if this was a random break-in, which I still didn't believe, we just recovered one stolen item. I'm going to follow the breadcrumbs back to the source. Chapter 10. I'd seen a few cameras inside Paulie's pawn, but none outside. Still, cameras were everywhere. I just had to figure out which ones covered the pawn shop and hack into them. That shouldn't be too hard, except each one was on a closed circuit. That would make life more difficult. Since I couldn't access the cameras remotely, I checked the time, went with Plan B, and set out for a few more pawn shops. Even though they all had shelves dedicated to sports memorabilia, I didn't spot any of Knox's collection. I asked about several of the other pieces and the ring, but no one made any solid promises the way the woman at Paulie's had. Most of the pawn shop owners weren't willing to send me away empty-handed. They could tell I was a potential big fish. They weren't going to toss me back into the ocean the way the first pawn shop I visited had.
Come back in a few days. We have constant turnover. There's no way to know what we'll have, but I bet it'll be something great,"
one of them said.
"Give me a number, and if I get a line on one of those game balls or that ring you're so anxious to find, I'll let you know. And if anything else comes in that might strike your fancy, I'll set it aside so you can have first pick," another one said. Reluctantly, I gave them my personal number because I didn't want to risk this tracking back to my PI firm. Pawn shop owners didn't like cops, and while I was the farthest thing from a cop,
Something told me they'd lump me into the same category as the boys and girls in blue. After hitting those dead ends, I dropped by to see a fence I knew. He called himself a concierge because he could get anyone anything at any time. When I'd been trying to be a big shot on the money scene, I'd gone to him for different things. Everything from dime bags of coke to Renaissance art. "Lucien Cross, I'll be damned!" Freddie Giles ushered me into the penthouse apartment. He wore a silk kimono and nothing else. He tugged on the belt. "What can I do you for?" He sniffed and wiped at his nose with the back of his hand. "You want to do a line?" "No, I'm good." I glanced around his place, wondering how he'd made such a vast upgrade since I'd last seen him. "I'm house-sitting for one of my clients." He strode to the bar. "At least have a drink." "Sure, that sounds great." He poured a gin and tonic, light on the tonic, and brought it over to me. Movement from the bedroom caught my eye. A woman in nothing but a lace thong crossed in front of the doorway. Freddie handed me a glass and took a seat on the couch across from me. I sat back in the chair and stared at the crown molding, hoping Freddie would take the hint and close his knees. "So, what exactly is it you're looking for? You said something about sports shit on the phone?" "I'm looking for this." I pulled a photo out of my breast pocket and held it out to him. He scooted forward on the couch, enabling me to stop staring at the ceiling. "That's the most expensive piece from the collection, but there's more. A lot more." Freddie whistled. "That's a one-of-a-kind piece. It'll be hard to come by." "I know. The rest of the collection isn't as prestigious, but the original owner wants it all back." "Stolen?" "Yeah." "Recently?" "Less than 2 weeks ago." "So it's smoking hot right now." Freddie picked up the 2 fingers of scotch he'd poured for himself and took a sip. "Unless the thief already has a buyer lined up, it'd be imbecilic to try to move this." "Uh-huh." I sipped my drink. "Do you think you can find it for me?" "Hey, I'm Freddie G. When have I not come through on something for you, huh?" "Never." "Damn straight." He pointed a finger at me before flopping back against the couch cushion and spreading his arms out wide. I resisted the urge to stare at the ceiling. "Have you already put out feelers?" I made a listing or 2 on the dark web, checked the usual online auction sites, and visited area pawn shops. I might be onto something. Paulie's Pawn. Do you know it? "They do a decent business. They get some nice stuff from time to time. Not that I'd do much business with them." "Are they legit?" "Is any pawn shop?" "Maybe." Freddie chuckled. "Well, they're the poor man's concierge. Did they promise they'd get you results?" "I was told to check back next week." "All right. I'll see if I can do you one better. Let me know if they come through in the meantime." "Do you know where they get their merchandise?" "It's the same place we all get our stuff. Fell off a truck." "The Rembrandt you got me didn't fall off a truck." "No, that deal was brokered by yours truly. All legit. Paperwork's golden. But I'm guessing since your pal lost his shit and you're looking to reappropriate it, you know this isn't going to have legit papers to go along with it." "I'm just trying to recover his stolen property." He cringed. "I don't like that word. Let's call it redistributable merchandise." I finished my gin and stood. "I don't care what you call it, Freddie. I just need to know who has it so I can get it back." "No, Lucy, that's not how this goes. Either I get it and act like a middleman, and the 2 sides never meet, or you're on your own." "Fine." I hated it when he called me Lucy. "Find the ring and we'll negotiate terms on how to go about recovering the rest of the redistributable merchandise." He grinned. "See? I taught you something new." The woman stepped out of the bedroom, practically naked, and moved over to the couch. She sat down beside Freddie, running her hand along his arm until she was leaning against him, and stared at me from beneath fake lashes. Her eyes were almost as glassy as his. Licking her lips, she whispered something in his ear. "She wants to know if you'd like to join us," Freddie said. "I can't. I have a dinner date." He snorted. "When did you become so reputable?" "You should try it sometime." I put the empty glass on the bar. "I'll see myself out." "Hey, Lucien," Freddie called, sounding more serious and a tad more sober. "I can be a reputable businessman when the situation calls for it, but that's not why you came to see me tonight." "I guess you're right." "I'll see what I can do. Just remember, my name never comes up with your pops or with your client. I'm not getting involved in a police investigation because I do have a reputation." "Thanks." I eyed the woman. "Have fun." Shaking off the nagging at the back of my mind that always came following a trip to Freddy's, I called Jade to let her know I was on my way to pick her up. As I walked out of the apartment building, I felt eyes on me. But when I looked around, no one was there. Visiting Freddy had made me paranoid, as it so often did. No matter how old I got or what I did, being that close to someone with that much contraband always made me nervous. I probably had my father to blame for it. As I drove away from the building, I made sure to maintain my speed and not violate any traffic laws. I kept one eye on my rearview mirror, but I didn't see any police cruisers or tails. That helped squelch the uneasy feeling that had wormed its way into the pit of my stomach. By the time I opened my front door and found Jade waiting for me, it was no longer even an afterthought. "Hey, honey, how was your day?" I took off my jacket and grabbed a hanger from the coat closet.
It was okay, I guess.
She picked at a hangnail, her gaze darting from me to the floor. "Did something happen?"
Nope, everything's great. I saw Mary Beth.
Her chin quivered a little.
We talked about some hard stuff.
"Are you sure you're okay?" I crossed the room and knelt in front of her, reminding myself she didn't like to be touched.
I'm fine. Stop asking me that.
I held up my palms. "Okay, give me 5 minutes to change into something else and then we'll go." I'd just pulled a black button-up with silver pinstripes from the closet when I noticed Jade lingering in the doorway. "Enjoying the view?"
Yes.
She chewed on her bottom lip for a few moments, a mischievous grin on her face. After changing into something stylish but casual, I closed the closet, went into the bathroom to wash my hands, ran a hand through my hair so it'd do that sexy, messy thing Jade liked, and grabbed my keys. "Still in the mood for Chinese?"
Absolutely, I'm starving.
From the way she'd been looking at me, I wasn't convinced it was the food she wanted, but the rest could wait until after we ate. While I set the alarm, she stepped into the hallway. I followed her out and pushed the button for the elevator. When we made it to my car, I opened her door and waited for her to get in.
You're such a gentleman.
She kissed my cheek and slid into the passenger seat. After I put the car into drive, she took my hand in hers.
You really haven't dated anyone since I left?
No.
Why not?
Jade, come on. Why are we having this conversation? I already knew it would lead to no good.
Humor me.
I've been busy. When would I have had the time?
What about before?
Before what? I glanced at her, returning my eyes to the road.
Before I showed up at your office that day. Before we met. Before Scott.
Since she had taken my freehand prisoner, I didn't have to worry about demonstrating my usual nervous tic. Instead, I found my throat had gone dry. After clearing it, I shrugged. I haven't seen anyone steady in a long time.
Except me?
I guess, if you call what we had steady.
We weren't casual.
No.
You let me stay over whenever I wanted.
I'd let you do anything you want. You know that. She fell silent. Unsure what minefield I would wander into by pursuing this line of questioning, I let the quiet linger for a while. When I couldn't take it anymore, I turned on the radio, flipping through the presets on the steering wheel controls until I found something fun and poppy. Jade squeezed my hand and sang along until we parked at the restaurant. The hostess greeted us and asked for our names. After marking something on the chart, she led us to a table near a window. I pulled out Jade's chair and pushed it in after she sat. Since she thought I was a gentleman, I figured I'd better act the part. A moment later, someone arrived to take our drink orders. We started with cocktails and a variety of appetizers. After he disappeared, Jade carefully studied the menu.
I haven't had good Chinese food in a long time.
She frowned at the selections. Is something wrong? If you'd rather go somewhere else, we can leave.
No, it's not that. I just can't decide what to get. It all looks so good. General Tso's chicken, beef and broccoli, shrimp lo mein, mushu pork.
She looked up at me.
What are you getting? We can split our entrees, right?
Jade, you don't have to pick. This is your last night in the city. You can have whatever you want. It's my treat.
No, I can't eat that much. Maybe we should have gone to one of those buffet places.
I cringed. Didn't you say you wanted good Chinese food? She laughed.
You got me there.
The appetizers came, and while Jade was distracted by the shrimp toast and spare ribs, I ordered a selection of soups, white and fried rice, and told the server we'd need a few minutes to figure out entrees. Jade appeared to be in heaven as she crunched on the fried shell surrounding an egg roll. After limiting our ordering to one item from each protein category, I settled into my chair, watching Jade nibble little pieces of everything. When the soups came, she picked out 2 to sample. Halfway through her cup of hot and sour, she abruptly put her spoon down and wiped her mouth.
"Stop staring at me. Aren't you going to eat anything?"
"Sorry. I just forgot how cute you are." I grabbed the bowl of wonton soup and scooted it closer. "Is it good?"
"It's fantastic."
She nudged the tray of appetizers closer, and I snared one of the egg rolls since she had no interest in them besides a single bite. I'd forgotten she didn't like them.
"That's better. You were making me feel like a gluttonous pig."
"You're not a pig. You've barely made a dent in anything."
"It all adds up."
"Don't tell me you're watching your figure. You're perfect no matter what."
"You mean that, don't you?"
I wouldn't have said it if I didn't. She stopped eating and wiped her mouth on the napkin before placing it back on her lap.
"It's quite possible. You're the most amazing guy in the world."
The way she said it made it seem like that was a problem, but no matter how I twisted it around in my head, I couldn't figure out what was wrong with that. Chapter 11. "Should we splurge and get the green tea ice cream?" I asked. Jade stared at me with wide eyes. The server had already taken back our 5 entrees to box up, along with the leftover appetizers and soups.
"You're joking."
"It's green tea ice cream. Didn't you drag me out of the house at 1 a.m. that time to get green tea ice cream because they wouldn't deliver and you had to have it?"
"I didn't drag you. Plus, you skipped PT that day. You were supposed to walk around. I just wanted to make sure you got your exercise."
"Uh-huh."
"I needed exercise too."
I snorted. "Fine. If you don't want to split a scoop of ice cream, I'll have to eat it all by myself."
"I don't want it."
"Okay." When it came, I picked up one of the 2 spoons, took a bite, and waited. Just like our first encounter, Jade stared at the food on the plate in front of me, except this wasn't a giant cookie, it was ice cream. After another spoonful, I pushed the bowl to the middle of the table. "All right, I'm done." While I was pulling my wallet out, Jade snared the second spoon and sliced off the other side of the ice cream globe. She closed her eyes to savor it, triggering a pain in my chest. This should be just another day for us, not a second goodbye. "Where are you applying to school?" I asked.
"What?"
"You said you had to get your transcripts. Don't schools usually send those upon request?"
"Sometimes, but I needed an unofficial copy."
She finished the rest of the ice cream.
"I think I'm going to pop."
She didn't answer my question. My inquisitive nature demanded a response, but I didn't push. Instead, I paid the check and picked up the bag of leftovers. Knowing Jade, she'd want a snack later tonight, and whatever was left I could take to the office for lunch. Justin would bitch about eating my leftovers, but this was one of the hottest new restaurants, and he wouldn't pass up the opportunity to sample the cuisine.
"Lucien,"
she nudged me as we made our way to the car.
"You just disappeared. Where did you go?"
"I'm right here."
"No, you're not."
She took the bag from my hand and slipped into the car. When I got in on my side, she had one knee up on the seat so she could face me directly.
"We can't keep doing this. We can't pretend what we have is nothing."
"I never said it was nothing. It's not nothing. But you don't want to be here, and I won't ask you to stay."
"Why not?"
"Jade, it's not fair."
"No, it's not. None of this is fucking fair."
She pressed her fingertips to her eyes to wipe the tears, breaking my heart.
"He did this to me. To us. The worst part is, I wouldn't even know you if it hadn't been for him."
My throat felt tight. "I know. But he can't hurt you. You're safe. You're safe here. You're safe in Colorado. Wherever you go, you'll be safe. I promise."
"A part of me wants to come back. I don't know."
She turned to face the windshield and put on her seatbelt.
"Let's go home."
I pulled into traffic. A light rain had started to fall in sync with Jade's tears, which she fought against. I paid attention to the rear view, noticing a silver SUV turn when I did. He pulled past me on the next street, and my eye caught a dark blue sedan a few cars back. I wondered if it had been an unmarked police car. From here, I couldn't tell, but I thought I spotted the bars and spotlight.
"Today was hell, Lucien. After I left your apartment, I went to Mary Beth's. Her roommate's going through a similar situation, but her ex isn't nearly as psychotic or dangerous. He calls a lot. The phone kept ringing. Maybe it was her nervous energy that I picked up on, But after that, I was anxious all day. It felt like people were watching me, following me. I can't tell you how many times I turned around and thought I saw someone tailing me."
Her words worried me. "What did he look like?"
"Scott."
She laughed.
"I know, it's crazy. And then when I took the train, I saw the cops down in the station, and God, those uniforms. You'd think I was a wanted criminal or something the way they freaked me out."
"It's okay."
"No, it's not. I want to take control of my life. I don't want to be freaked out for no good reason."
"Are you still freaked out?"
"No. After I got back to the apartment, I didn't feel like I was being watched anymore. I felt safe. You always make me feel safe. Your apartment feels safe. You let me stay with you a lot after it happened. Your place is like my second home, maybe my only home in this city. You're my home, Lucien. This place isn't."
"You can stay with me as long as you like." Recalling our conversation from yesterday, I asked, "Do you want to live together? I didn't think that was something you ever wanted to do again."
I don't know."
"Okay."
"Is that something you want?"
My hand went through my hair. "This can't be my decision."
"Why not?"
The dark sedan turned, but the silver SUV, which had passed me and parked at the hydrant while I'd been stopped at the red light, pulled back in behind me after I passed. It sent an uneasy feeling through me. Then again, this conversation had already spiked my blood pressure and adrenaline, so I couldn't tell if my reaction had anything to do with the SUV or if it had everything to do with Jade and our relationship status.
"Why not?"
she repeated. My gaze flicked from the rear view to the side mirrors. I took the next turn, wondering if the SUV would follow. It did. I took the turn after that.
"Lucien, where are we going? What's wrong?"
"I'm not sure." She paled, turning to glance behind us. The SUV had dropped back 2 car lengths, but its high profile made it easy to spot over the Mazda coupe behind me. I took the next turn. The Mazda went straight, and the SUV turned too. One more turn, and we'd have gone in a complete circle. So I made the last turn, but the SUV didn't follow. It turned in the opposite direction. Letting out a sigh, I checked a few more times to see if anyone else was following me, but we were in the clear. Jade's paranoia must have been contagious. "We're okay," I said, hoping to soothe her. "False alarm."
"Who do you think would be following you?"
"I don't know."
"You don't know?"
"No, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility. The cops have it out for me, more now than before, and with my clients you never know who I might piss off." She swallowed, fidgeting with the seatbelt and drumming her fingers against her thighs. At that moment, I knew she couldn't stay. It wouldn't be fair to her. She needed to feel safe, and my life wasn't safe. I wasn't safe. Just ask the angel of death. We returned to my apartment without incident and had passionate, life-affirming sex. When I opened my eyes after a brief nap, I found Jade curled up on the window seat with her legs tucked beneath her. She wore my shirt with the sleeves rolled up to her elbows.
"It's still raining."
She scooted forward so I could slide in between her and the wall. I rested my back against it and placed one foot flat on the window seat beside her. She settled into the space I made with her head resting just beneath my chin. I brushed the soft waves of her red hair with my fingers. She put her hand on my knee.
"Maybe I should delay my departure date."
"You can. We have tons of Chinese left to eat." She laughed, but her focus remained out the window. We were so high up it was hard to see much beneath us, especially in the dark. Still, I spotted a large, silver, sports utility vehicle parked at a hydrant. The bike rack on top reminded me of the one from earlier. A lot of people in this building owned similar vehicles, so I resisted the urge to investigate further. I didn't want to freak Jade out, and right now I wanted to spend every remaining moment close to her.
"Any interest in moving to Colorado?"
she asked.
"I'm sure they could use privatized policing, security consultants, or private eyes."
She tilted her head to the side to look at me.
"What do you even call yourself?"
"Most days Lucien, sometimes Cross. It just depends on my mood."
"That's not what I meant."
"It depends on the client. The guy I'm working for now needed a private eye, so that's what he got. Miranda needed a security consultant, so that's what she got."
"You're like a chameleon. They blend into whatever environment they inhabit. See? You could live in Colorado.
I could, but I didn't want to. Perhaps one day I'll be able to expand to the West Coast. Maybe open an LA office. What do you think of Los Angeles?
That'd be nice.
One day, but not today or tomorrow. I cleared my throat. Jade, I lied to you earlier. I said you were safe here, but I don't know if that's true. Being around me is unpredictable. I don't exactly get paid to find lost dogs.
You're in the business of making enemies.
She shivered.
I know. I've seen firsthand what happens when you piss people off.
I'm not asking you to leave now or tomorrow or ever, but I want you to be aware of what could happen.
I am.
She turned to check the time.
My flight leaves at 1:20. I should be at the airport by 11:30.
You don't have to go, I said, but we both knew that wasn't true.
I don't want you to wait.
At the airport? You want me to just drop you off?
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you. Your future.
Honey, I'm still getting this office off the ground. I can't expand yet.
No, Lucien. I meant I don't want you to wait for me. You should go out, have fun, date. What we've been doing since I left hasn't been healthy for either of us.
What have we been doing? We talk once or twice a week. We're friends, right?
Friends who have sex.
They call those benefits, I said. She let out a sigh and pulled away from me.
We have to move on. I have to move on. You have to move on.
I didn't realize I was stopping you. I fought to keep the anger out of my voice, but I wasn't sure I succeeded.
You haven't, but you're stopping yourself. I don't want to feel guilty or responsible for that. I'm not ready to date yet, but one day I will be. If you're still burning a candle for me when that time comes, I don't know what will happen. But I can't come back here. I just can't.
Nodding, I got up and went into the kitchen. This conversation required a drink. Several drinks. While I poured a shot of whiskey, Jade went to the fridge, heated some leftovers, took her plate to the table, and sat down.
Don't be mad.
She slid the food around on the plate for something to do. I'm not. I swallowed the shot and resisted the urge to pour a second one. The last thing she needed was to see me drunk and angry. That would just bring back bad memories from relationships past. Do I remind you of him?
No.
But when you see me, you think about what happened that night, right? She stared at the table, barely nodding. Well, fuck. I dropped into the chair across from her, picked up the extra fork she'd grabbed, and skewered a piece of chicken. I didn't scare her, but I reminded her of all the things she hoped to forget. The city might not be the problem, but I was. We sat in silence, picking our way through the chicken and vegetables. Neither of us had an appetite, but it was something to do. The food tasted like wet cement, but it eliminated the need for conversation, apologies, or arguments. When we were done eating our late-night snack, I cleaned the kitchen while Jade brushed her teeth and went back to bed. After I joined her, she curled up against my chest and fell asleep. I watched her for the longest time, glancing occasionally out the window at the suspicious-looking SUV. Around dawn, my eyelids drooped. I love you, I whispered before falling asleep. Chapter 12. By the time we left for the airport, the SUV was gone. I kept an eye out for possible tails, but in the light of day, none of that seemed real. Our conversation from last night had numbed me. I pulled to a stop at the end of the drop-off line. Jade leaned over, running a hand over the stubble on my jaw.
Lucien.
I know. I took her hand and pressed it to my lips. You have to go? The reason you left was to put this behind you?
Maybe one day I will.
Maybe. She leaned in and kissed me on the mouth.
Don't wait. Promise me.
I won't. She swallowed, her lashes wet from the impending tears.
Good, because I'm going to want progress reports.
Some things are best left unsaid.
You're going to date whether you like it or not.
Jade, I'm not much of a dater.
Fine. Go get laid. I don't care. Just be safe. And I mean that every which way imaginable.
Yes, ma'am. I watched her reach for the strap on her duffel. Are you sure you don't want me to park and walk you inside?
No. It's time we said goodbye.
Call me when you get home?
I will.
She kissed me again, a desperate, passionate yearning that had me leaning so far over the seatbelt nearly choked me. Then she grabbed her bag and slammed the door. I waited until she was safely inside before parking the car and hoping she'd change her mind, even though I knew it was best that she didn't. After her flight took off, I paid the 2-hour parking fee and headed back to my office, my mind on nothing but the smell of her shampoo and the taste of her lips.
"Hey, boss."
Justin looked up when I didn't mumble back a greeting.
"Is everything okay?"
Uh-huh. Justin exchanged a look with Gloria before following me into my office. He had a stack of files in his arms, which he dropped beside my computer.
"No hits on your listings on the dark web. I made those calls you asked me to, but none of the other pawn shops had the items I requested."
Did you ask if they could get them?
"They were dead ends."
Pouring a hefty amount of scotch into my empty coffee cup, I took a sip. Call Paulie's and ask about Knox's baseball collection. But use one of the burner phones we have in the cabinet. I don't want them to connect that to me.
"I can be vague. Anything else?"
Did Freddie call?
"No."
It had been less than 24 hours. I had to give the man time to work, but my patience had grown thin. I wanted this case to be over. Have you set up interviews for the new security staff?
"They start tomorrow at noon and run through the following day."
What about new applicants?
"The posting went out yesterday. I mentioned we'd interview on Friday of next week."
Fine. I swallowed more scotch, burning the back of my throat. I'll get started on the work I promised our 2 new corporate clients. Once I get the employee background checks out of the way, I'll move on to their internet security assessments. If I do it myself, we won't have to hire freelance IT guys. I waved a dismissive hand in Justin's direction, not wanting to look up and see the question or concern on his face. But he didn't move.
"The last time I saw you like this was 2 days before you threw our boss's chair through the window."
It's a good thing I'm the boss. Now get back to work. The hours went by without me noticing. Background checks were time-consuming, but they didn't require much brain power. Type, skim, print. I could probably do it in my sleep if I only knew how to sleep with my eyes open and fingers moving. Justin brought a plate into my office and put it on the edge of my desk. He didn't say anything, but I thanked him for the pizza. The smell made my stomach growl, even though I hadn't noticed I was hungry. Folding the slice in half, I chewed on the end while I stared out the window. Why was it suddenly so dark out? A glance at the clock told me it was almost 10. No wonder my legs were numb. After I finished the slice, I used the desk to push myself into a standing position and locked my knees, waiting for the blood to flow and feeling to return before I tried to walk. Before going home, I'd have to put in some time at the gym or I'd regret it tomorrow. A worrisome thought came to my mind. I went into the outer office. Did I receive any calls?
"Nothing."
I returned to the office and called a contact I had with Jade's cell phone carrier. Her phone was turned off. I pulled up her flight information and found that due to bad weather, her return flight had been rerouted to Atlanta and delayed a few hours. Now I felt like a stalker. No better than her previous ex. This has to stop, I muttered.
"What, boss?"
"Working so late. You should have left hours ago."
"Then who would be here to assist you?"
"Don't be a smart ass."
"I finished writing the reports you wanted and left them in your Dropbox to review before you send them to our clients. I also invoiced Mr. Rathbone for the next quarter to include the advanced services he requested, and I have 3 interviews scheduled for new applicants next Friday. As far as Mr. Knox's case, Paulie's didn't bite when I asked about the basketballs. I did some more checking, but found nothing. No one has. Whoever stole Knox's stuff is keeping a low profile. Do you think it's another collector with no interest in the monetary value?"
Could be, but why did he hire a crew to commit the theft and pawn the signed pennant?
"Maybe the thieves don't like baseball."
It's possible, but it doesn't seem right. I leaned my hips against his desk, stretching one leg then another. My back pinched, and I bit back the wince. I checked the intel you sent me on the company, but it was rather vague. Did you dig up anything else on the LLC or Dmitry Lenmir?
"Nope."
Me neither. It looks like a reputable business, at least as far as pawn shops go. I even checked the employees, but that didn't get me far either.
"You need to identify their sellers. Perhaps you should try the direct approach."
Too risky. I could tip them off. I went back to my office, shut down my computer, removed my gun from the drawer, tucked it behind my back, and put on my jacket. What do we have tomorrow morning?
Not much. A few interviews with prospective clients.
Good. If I'm late, you're in charge. You know what to do. I trust you can take care of it.
What are you going to do?
Identify the seller and drink myself into a stupor.
I take it she left?
I nodded, not wanting to say the words, but needing to tell someone. She's not coming back.
You could visit her. Go away for romantic weekends every so often. You have the money.
Originally, I thought maybe that'd be something she'd want. Come to think of it, I didn't know. She said we could be together if and when we were in the same time zone, but then she insisted we had to move on. Perhaps I'd ask for clarification, but I'm pretty sure we're done.
In that case, invite someone to drink with you. Miranda might still be in town.
No, she's a client. I'm not crossing that line.
Since when?
Right now. I stared at the neon sign for Paulie's Pawn. It was no longer lit. The woman who'd helped me yesterday had left 45 minutes ago after pulling down the metal gate covering the front door and windows. A few dull lights remained within, probably from the display cases. The place wouldn't be easy to breach. They had an alarm system and not a cheap one. The front would be too obvious and draw a lot of attention. Even though the pawn shop closed for the night, several adult shops and a few bars on the street did a good business. Someone would notice the idiot in the suit breaking in, and even if they didn't, one of the nearby security cameras would. Deciding it was best to rethink my plan of attack, I assessed the neighboring exterior cameras, figuring I might be able to pull footage of the thieves entering Paulie's Pawn with Knox's memorabilia instead. The Stop and Shop on the corner had the best angle of the pawn shop's side door, so I spent the better part of the next 2 hours attempting to hack into local networks and access the nearby security feeds. But I had no luck. Either I didn't have nearly as many computer skills as I like to pretend I did, or the security feeds were hardwired or non-networked. From the looks of the security cameras I'd seen, I was betting on the latter. That left me with two options: go into the nearby shops and politely ask for access to their exterior security footage for the last few days, or wait a few more hours and do it the hard way. The first option would bulk up the incidentals I'd charge Mr. Knox. Also, I didn't know if the surrounding shop owners would comply with my request. Something told me the nature of their businesses would make them less likely to want to help a private investigator. If they didn't want to help, I'd have to resort to Plan B anyway, so maybe I should just start there. Circling the block, I entered the Stop and Shop. The guy behind the counter was watching a video on his phone, but looked up when the bell above my head chimed. He nodded at me and went back to his video. Another employee was mopping around a caution sign, where blue slushy covered the floor and continued to drip from the machine. "Bathroom?" I asked. The guy with the mop jerked his chin toward the narrow hallway between the coolers and the hot dog machine.
"It's unlocked."
"Thanks." I went down the hall, hoping to find an office or back room where the security system might be. Unfortunately, the only door in the hallway led to a unisex bathroom. Shaking my head at the disgusting smell that assaulted me the moment I opened the door, I retreated, having no desire to even pretend to use the john. Neither man noticed when I returned to the main area, so I went around a few shelves until I happened upon another door. This one was open, and led to a storage room with janitorial supplies, excess stock, a couple of lawn chairs, and a rusted aluminum TV tray covered in cigarette ashes and squished-out butts. Again, no security system.
"Hey, what are you doing?"
The guy with the mop wheeled it into the back room, not bothering to empty the muddy blue water from the bucket before shoving it into a corner.
"The bathroom's down the other hall."
"I don't need the bathroom." He sized me up.
"So what do you want?"
"I'm looking for your security system."
"Why?"
I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. Flipping it open to my PI license, I flashed it at him like a TV cop and tucked it back into my pocket before he got a good look at it. "The camera outside covers the street and a few of the other shops. I wanted to check something out. I need your footage from the last 2 weeks. I can make it worth your while." The guy cocked an eyebrow at my jacket.
"All our camera shit is behind the counter. You got a warrant or something?"
"I have a few Benjamins to award anyone who wants to help out."
"How many?"
Laughing at the shakedown, I pulled out 2 crisp $100 bills. "One for you and one for your pal." I handed them both to him. "I just need a copy of the footage."
"You got something I could save it on?"
This wasn't the first time someone wanted the footage from this shop. I handed him a blank USB drive. He pocketed it.
"All right, buy some chips or gum or something. I'll meet you out front," he said.
Following him out of the storage room, I picked up a bag of pre-popped popcorn and a cola before making my way to the counter. By then, the guy who'd been watching TV had gone to service the coffee machine. I placed the items on the counter for the other guy to ring up. After I paid, he slid the USB back to me with my change.
Have a nice day.
I gave him my hard stare, wondering if he'd bilked me out of $200. I guess I'd find out soon enough. Thanks. Once I got back to my car, I circled around to another spot farther down the block, grabbed my laptop, and plugged in the drive. The store clerk had copied all the footage from the last 14 days. I scanned back to the night of the break-in at Trey Knox's apartment, cracked open the bottle of cola, and wrote down every license plate that parked outside of Paulie's Pawn. A white van appeared 4 different times, every 3 days since the break-in. The driver, a young man wearing a trench coat and a bowler hat who kept his face turned away from the cameras, always went to the side door with a large cardboard box. I had no idea what was inside, but since I never spotted anyone else entering the store with anything large enough to hold Knox's collection, or even just the pennant, this had to be one of the thieves. Now I just had to figure out who he was. Chapter 13. The last place I wanted to go was back to the office. Instead, I went to Charlene's, an upscale speakeasy I used to frequent a lifetime ago. The smell of cigar smoke and expensive liquors permeated the air. I recognized a few faces, but it had been years since I'd talked to most of those people.
What'll it be?
The attractive bartender asked. Scotch and soda.
Cigar?
I shook my head.
Do you want to start a tab?
I'll pay as I go.
Great.
She poured while I fished some cash out of my wallet. I probably should have started a tab, since I was running low on green and had no idea how long I'd be here. I gave her a $20 tip, took my drink, and found a comfy chair next to a mahogany side table. This gave me the perfect spot to drink and work. While I sipped my scotch, I ran the plate number on the van. It was registered to a storage facility, so I did some checking on the storage facility. It was just like every other climate-controlled self-storage facility around, except it was owned by Lenmere LLC. Anything could be inside those units. The white van was available for rent from the place. Not only could you pay to store your stuff, but you could also rent the van to move your crap to and from the unit. That was genius. The place was full service. Idly, I wondered how to make Cross Security more full service. So far, I offered security consultations, investigations, and protection. What else would my clients want or need?
Mind if I join you?
A woman asked. I looked up. She wore ridiculously high heels, which made her already too thin legs look even thinner. She had a cocktail in her hand and practically crawled over my lap to get to the chair on the other side. I never said yes. She pouted at me.
Don't you want company? You look lonely.
Her hand ran up my thigh. I laughed, picking up on just a hint of an accent. How much?
Depends.
No, it doesn't. I shook my head, feeling like I was being punked. Charlene's was upscale. Then again, so was the woman in the high heels. I'd crossed plenty of lines in my day, but hiring a sex worker was something I'd never even consider. What are you drinking?
A gimlet.
That's funny. I'm normally a gin guy. She smiled demurely.
What else do you like?
I'd like you to take your hand off my leg. She leaned forward, her cleavage spilling out from the top of her dress. I'd say it was designer, probably last season or the season before. It tied in the front, but it didn't scream cheap. And until she bent over, it didn't scream sex either.
Why?
I looked around the room. I clocked the crowd. The waitstaff appeared attentive. They knew the regulars, the troublemakers, and exactly what was going on. From the glances they kept giving a table near the back, I had my own suspicions. Adjusting in the seat, I closed my laptop and tucked it back in my bag. A man and woman sat at the back table. He looked comfortable, but they only had water glasses in front of them. He kept stroking her arm, gesturing animatedly with his drink hand, and doing his best to appear drunk. She appeared to be bored out of her mind. Raising my glass in his direction, I smiled and nodded. For the life of me, I couldn't remember his name, but I remembered his beefy face and the scar tissue around his nose. He'd played high school football and a little in college until he got kicked off the team for a knee injury. I'd heard the story a dozen times in the academy. Elvis? Elmer? It was something like that. "Friend of yours?" she asked. Nope. I scanned the rest of the room, but I didn't spot her pimp. He might be outside, or she worked for a service, or herself. It was hard to tell with the way the sex industry had broken down, but I hoped her actions were her choice. The Johns treated her well, and the management wasn't abusive. I'd suggest you take the night off unless you want to spend it in a cell. I might be lonely, but I don't pay for company. Call it a pride thing. It's just how I am. No offense. She shrugged it off. "Are you a cop?" No. My gaze remained on the two across the room. I wasn't cut out for it. "Okay," she said uncertainly. Downing the rest of my drink, I grabbed my computer bag and headed for the exit. On my way, I detoured to the table in the back corner and gave Elvis a pat on the shoulder. "You following me?" I asked.
"Shit! Cross, is that you?"
"In the flesh."
"Geez, what's it been, like 5 years?"
"Something like that." He gave his head a shake and nudged the woman.
"This is Lucien fucking Cross."
He turned back to stare at me.
"Are you shitting me right now?"
"Are you following me?"
"You? Fuck no. We're hoping to find some crumbs that'll lead us to the big cheese."
I gave him a cockeyed look.
"This is Tanya, my partner."
He alternated between staring at me and the prostitute, who had now moved on to a broker seated at the bar.
"You're blowing our cover, Mr. Cross,"
the other vice cop whispered. I held up my palms. "You need to dress better if you want to blend in at a bar like this. This place has standards."
"You were always a dick,"
Elvis mumbled. "Glad I could be of assistance. Have a lovely night, officers." My voice carried, and half the bar turned to stare at the cops seated at the table. As I left Charlene's, Jade's fears played through my head. She said someone had been following her. My gut said the SUV I spotted last night had been tailing us, even though it broke off pursuit. Could it have been a few police officers hoping to rattle Jade for revenge? They might also want to rattle me, except I didn't rattle. That might explain Elvis and the prostitute. The working girl could have been an undercover vice cop. When I made it back to my car, I made a point not to put the keys in the ignition. If the cops were out to get me, I wouldn't give them a slam dunk on drunk driving charges, even if I doubted I was beyond the legal limit. Instead, I locked the doors and surveyed the area. A silver SUV with a bike rack sat parked a few blocks away. I couldn't make out much from here, but since I didn't see any exhaust, I had to assume the engine was off. It could belong to the cops inside. Elvis was enough of a creep to follow me as a form of harassment, so I waited, wondering if I'd be stopped once I pulled out of the parking space. Maybe Jade's fears had fueled my paranoia. I couldn't be sure, so I remained in my car for another 30 minutes while I finished the work I started in the bar before the prostitute interrupted me. Perhaps she was working with Vice in exchange for a reduced sentence, and this was a sting to arrest a few Johns. Boy, were they barking up the wrong tree. My phone rang, and I laughed when I saw Jade's name on the display. "Hi."
"You're in a good mood,"
she said. "I was just propositioned."
"Wow, you don't waste any time."
She sounded hurt. I said no.
"Why? I told you to move on."
"And this morning you were in my bed. I'm not going to move on that quickly. How was your flight? Did you just land?"
"A little while ago. We were redirected. I'm home now."
She sighed.
"Tell me about the woman who propositioned you. Was she pretty?"
"She's a professional."
"Well, you like professionals."
"Not a business professional. A sex worker."
"Oh."
Jade paused, unsure what to say.
"Don't have sex with a prostitute?"
"I wasn't planning on it."
"Good. Don't."
"Any other rules I should be aware of?"
"No."
"Jade, honey," I sucked in a breath. "I don't like how we left things. I want to ask you something. It's probably too soon, but in the event I find myself out west or traveling somewhere fun and exotic, I was thinking if the two of us are unattached at that time, maybe we could meet up for a few days and have some fun together, like you originally suggested. Is that something you might still consider?"
"Isn't that counterproductive?"
"I don't know. Is it? I'm not saying we wait. I'm just saying if I'm free and you're free and we're in the same place at the same time, why can't we make the most of it? She didn't say anything, but I could picture her biting her lip and fidgeting with whatever was nearby.
Let me talk to my therapist about it.
Whatever you want, I just wanted some clarification. I counted to 10. I'm glad you got home safely.
Me too.
Before you go, I just had one more question. The guy you thought was following you yesterday, did you see him get into a vehicle?
No. Why?
No reason. I stared out the windshield at the SUV. I should let you go. Sweet dreams.
Goodbye, Lucien.
Every time she said it, I hated it more and more. Irritated, I shook off my paranoid thoughts as nothing more than a consequence of my fucked-up romantic situation and headed for the gym. If the police wanted to pull me over, I'd make their night a living hell. But I arrived at my destination without incident. After changing in the locker room, I stretched, warmed up on the treadmill, and hit the free weights. After too many rows and deadlifts, my lower back ached, but at least my legs weren't numb. Too spent to do much else, I showered and headed home. Chapter 14. You've got to be kidding me. I adjusted my rearview mirror so the morning sun wouldn't be quite so blinding. Could this be a paranoid hallucination? I turned in my seat and looked behind me. Nope, not a hallucination. The silver SUV was 2 car lengths away. I'd seen it pull out of the parking space across the street from my apartment as soon as I pulled out of the garage. This was no coincidence. I turned, the SUV turned. This was getting ridiculous. As I approached the next traffic light, the car between us switched lanes, placing the SUV directly behind me. Due to the sun's glare and that reflective plastic sheet he had over his front plate, I couldn't get his license plate number. I kept going straight, but he stayed with me. At the next intersection, I came upon a stale yellow. It had turned red before I made it to the white lines. Oh well, I needed to get a new car anyway. Slowing down, I came to a practical crawl as I approached the light. The moment it turned red, I gunned the engine and flew through the intersection. Despite the angry beeps and shouted expletives, the SUV kept pace with me. Whoever this asshole was, he must not know who he was messing with. At this time of morning, I wasn't in the mood. I took a sharp right turn and another. I thought I lost him, but I spotted the SUV making the first turn I'd already made. Nope, we're not doing this. I cut through an alley, ignoring the posted signs prohibiting such action, and pulled out directly in front of him. For a moment, I didn't think the SUV would stop before it T-boned me, but it screeched to a halt. The shriek of the brakes still echoed as I threw open my door and aimed my gun at the driver. "Let me see your hands!" The driver looked up from whatever it was he'd been staring at on his lap, fear marring his features. He raised both hands as I maneuvered around my car, the engine purring as it idled. He didn't open his door or make any move whatsoever. When I got closer, I wondered why some college-aged guy was tailing me. He didn't look like he posed a threat, but that didn't mean anything. He could be fresh out of the police academy, or a military reject working as a hitman. From the way he trembled, I doubted the likelihood of the second, but it was the best way to be prepared for anything. "Open the door!" I kept my gun trained on him. Okay, whatever you want, just don't hurt me." Slowly, he unlocked the door. As soon as I heard the click, I grabbed the handle and yanked the door open. The guy wore khakis and a blue polo. "Why are you following me?" I asked. "Following you? I'm not following you." Grabbing his collar, I tried to yank him out of the seat, but the belt held him in place. Instead, I took his wallet from where he'd left it on the center console and glanced at his ID. Will Esposito. He was 26, just a couple of years younger than me, but he looked like he'd be carted at bars. "You can have my money, the car, whatever, just don't hurt me." He cowered as I leaned closer, my gun in his face. "My mom said I'd get carjacked in this neighborhood. Just let me out, and you can take it." He hit the seatbelt release with his right hand before raising his palms again. "Take it, okay? You can have it. I won't fight you." He tried to get out of the car, but I blocked his exit. Allowing him to move about freely wasn't tactically sound. None of what I was doing was tactically sound, but that was beside the point. I stared at him as if he were nuts. "Do you see what I'm driving? Why would I want this piece of shit?" "I don't know." I took a step back. Why have you been following me?" "I haven't. I'm not," he swallowed. "You made every turn I did until I circled you. You followed me through the red. I saw you parked outside my apartment the last few nights and at the bar. Who the hell are you? What do you want?" "What?" He shifted again, and I realized he'd wet himself. "I'm looking for 127 Claremont. I'm not following you." For the first time, he realized we weren't even on a main thoroughfare. 2 or 3 cars had driven past us, but no one had stopped. No one wanted to intervene in a dangerous situation. He pointed to his phone mounted to the tray beneath his stereo. "I wasn't paying attention to the traffic light. I was just keeping up with the flow while I figured out the maps on the GPS." Nothing about his story rang true, but I had no way of disproving any of it. And with a few more cars approaching, it was only a matter of time before someone called the cops to check it out. "Don't let me see you again." I pointed down the street. "Turn left, then right. It'll put you on Claremont. 127 should be on the left about halfway down." Thanks." I got back in my car, wrote down his plate number, and waited for him to drive away. The cars behind us honked, annoyed by the inconvenience, but I didn't care. I'd led him to a secluded area, but no city street was secluded during morning rush hour. After hitting speed dial, I gripped the steering wheel to combat the jitters. "Justin, I need you to run a plate for me." I gave him the SUV's license plate number. "See what you can dig up. After that, run a name. Will Esposito. If everything checks out, call Mr. Almeida and see if he can squeeze me in. The sooner the better."
"Are you all right, boss? You sound a little out of breath."
"I'm fine. I'll see you soon." Turning my car around, I headed in the opposite direction. No silver SUV tailed me, but I couldn't shake the feeling someone was following me. "You're losing it," I told myself as I zipped through traffic and pulled into the parking garage near the office. Slowly, I checked each level, but nothing suspicious caught my eye. I replayed my morning, wondering if I'd overreacted. The kid would probably call the cops. Traffic cams in the area would identify me in no time. By lunchtime, the police would have me in cuffs. My attorney better return my call. The best defense would be to have one ready to go before we had to scramble to come up with something. And right now, I had nothing. No proof of being stalked or followed. I couldn't even be positive the silver SUV I kept seeing had been the same silver SUV. Today was the first time I'd gotten a plate number. When I opened the door to cross security and investigations, Gloria greeted me with a cup of coffee and a friendly smile.
"Good morning, sir."
"Thank you." I took the coffee, wanting to hug her for the unexpected act of kindness, but I refrained.
"Mr. Almeida is in a meeting right now, but he'll call you back as soon as he's finished. He knows it's urgent,"
Gloria said.
"Justin is conducting a consultation in your office, but he left the information you requested up on his computer screen."
"Fabulous."
"Is there anything I can do?"
"You're wonderful. You know that?" I took a seat behind his desk and read the report. The SUV was registered to Lillian Esposito, a 52-year-old woman. Will was her son. He had no criminal record.
"I do, but it's nice to hear it,"
she said. "I'll keep that in mind. I don't imagine we'll have any walk-ins today, but if we do, give them an appointment for later in the week and organize our calendar. Also, if you wouldn't mind making arrangements to have breakfast and lunch delivered the rest of the week, something to keep the break room stocked for the interviewees and new client consultations we'll be conducting, I'd appreciate it."
"Do you need the bar in your office restocked?"
"Always." I clicked a few keys and checked Will's social media, not sure what I hoped to find. According to recent posts, he was starting a new job today. Shit.
"Is everything okay?"
It could be worse. I could be Will. A part of me hated that I'd possibly ruined this guy's new job, and another part of me knew a silver SUV, just like the one he drove, had been following me for the last few days. I wasn't convinced Will hadn't been tailing me, but if I'd gotten the wrong SUV, that meant whoever was tailing me was still out there. Going into the break room, I peered out the tiny window, but I didn't see any suspicious vehicles parked in front of the building. All right, I had to let this go. I didn't have time to chase ghosts or lunatics. I had a lead to follow on Trey Knox's case and plenty of work to do in the office. The phone rang.
"Let me see if he's in."
Gloria stepped into the break room.
"Mr. Cross, a Mr. Freddy is on the phone, but he didn't give his last name."
"I'll take it at your desk." This was just another reason why I needed a bigger office with more actual offices. Perhaps the break room, which had been a closet, should be converted into an extra office, but where would we put the espresso maker? Gloria stayed in the break room to take inventory and figure out what we should keep on hand while I answered the phone. "Hey, Lucy, how's it hanging?" Freddie G. asked. "What do you have for me?" "So, I called my guy who knows a guy. He's been hearing whispers about that ring you're looking for. He says he can't get a hold of it since it's already been promised to someone else, but he'll keep looking in case there's another one around. Then again, we could always just have one made." "No, I need that one. Who's it promised to?" With any luck, the answer was me. "I don't know. I tried to press him on it, but he didn't like that. This isn't exactly how I normally conduct business, and he knows it." "What do you normally do, Freddie?" "If I can't get it from one source, I go to another." "What happens if they all run dry?" "They never all run dry, baby." I waited for Freddie to connect the dots. "Yeah, okay, I'll do some more asking around. Just know, if this were anybody else, I'd have one custom made and pass it off as the real thing, but I know that won't help you." "No, it won't. Did your guy happen to mention anything about Paulie's pawn?" "No." But from Freddie's tone, I didn't entirely believe him. "You got a connection besides me, Lucy?" "Yeah, me." I took a breath. "If you find out who it's already been promised to or who the seller is, let me know." "That'll cost you." "I'd expect nothing less." Freddie laughed. "Drop by the penthouse around midnight. I should have something for you by then. I expect the usual payment." "You got it." Assuming the cops didn't arrest me for assault with a deadly weapon. Just as I hung up the phone, it rang a second time. Gloria poked her head out of the break room, but I shook my head. I hadn't gotten to where I was without having to answer a phone a time or two. "Cross Security and Investigations. Lucien Cross speaking."
"Since when do you answer your own phone?" Mr. Almeida asked. "Did the hired help finally mutiny?"
"Don't bust my balls. I'm having a hell of a morning."
"Do I want to know?"
I told him what happened, including what I thought and where it occurred. "I don't know if he'll press charges."
"He should. You got his name, right? Maybe I should give him a call and make a suggestion."
"You're not funny."
"Maniacs with guns shouldn't scare the piss out of people on their way to work," Almeida said.
"I'm aware."
"You need to act like it. I'm guessing you never filed a report or spoke to anyone in the police department about your stalker?"
"There was no point."
"Did you tell this guy who you were?"
"No."
"All right. Let's hope he's too embarrassed to say anything or make a report. You gave him directions, after all. That was nice of you."
I rolled my eyes. "What would you suggest I do if the police come knocking?"
"Throw yourself on the mercy of the court, or do what you always do. Keep your damn mouth shut and wait for me to show up to save your ass."
"Thanks."
"Seriously, Lucien, I wouldn't worry about it. You didn't harm him or cause any property damage, so you might be able to write it off as road rage. You tried to make amends at the scene, and if pushed, we'll say you're willing to go to anger management. Now, if you don't mind, I have clients with actual problems. I'd prefer if you don't turn into one of them, so stay out of trouble the rest of the day."
"We'll see."
"I don't like the sound of that."
Ignoring the comment, I said, "While I have you, I want to let you know I'll have half a dozen or so new employee contracts that need review by the end of the week."
"Send them over. I'll add it to your billables along with this phone call. You know, if you keep this up, I won't have to take on any new clients. Maybe I'll just work for you."
"Cross Security could use in-house counsel. What do you say?"
"Talk to me when you have a nice benefits package and partner perks to discuss."
"I'll have Justin draft a proposal."
"Save yourself some time. I'm already at your disposal 24/7, and I have too much invested with Reeves to jump ship now. My name's on the fucking door, and I don't think you have any desire to rename your company Almeida and Cross."
As usual, my attorney was correct. Unfortunately, I had a terrible habit of not listening. Chapter 15. While my assistant conducted consultations and scheduled appointments, I dug deeper into Lenmere LLC. Since the company owned Paulie's Pawn and the self-storage facility which supplied the rental van, I wondered if the pawn shop used that to hold their surplus storage, or if something much more sinister was going on. Whoever broke into Mr. Knox's home and stole his collection could have stored the stolen items in one of the many climate-controlled units. However, I couldn't get names or unit numbers from inside my office. I'm going out. I grabbed my keys and slipped on my jacket. Forward any calls to my cell.
You got it, Mr. Cross,
Gloria said. On my way across town, I kept an eye on my mirrors, but I didn't spot a tail. The self-storage facility was near the water and guarded by a tall fence. The top had razor wire and spotlights posted around the perimeter. It looked more like a high-security prison than a place for people to stow their belongings. The office was nothing more than a cinder-block shack with a glass door. Pulling open the door, I was assaulted by the pungent aroma of stale paint. From the look of things, the place had probably been painted a couple of weeks ago, but without any windows or obvious means of ventilation, the fumes remained. A man looked up from behind the desk where he'd been reading a textbook.
You looking to rent a unit?
Maybe. I gazed at the price chart on the wall behind him. What kinds of things do people keep in these units?
Furniture, boxes, just whatever.
Do you have a key to the units?
Nope. You bring your own lock.
He marked something in the margin of the book with his pencil, stuck a piece of paper inside, and closed the book. Physical science.
What are you hoping to store?
Baseball cards.
You serious?
He gave me a cockeyed look.
How many baseball cards do you have?
Thousands. I watched his reaction, but he looked shocked. If the thief used one of the units to stow Knox's collection, he hadn't shared that info with the guy working behind the counter. Is that weird?
Whatever floats your boat, man, I don't ask. We just have a list of prohibited items.
He pointed to another sign before running his pointer finger across a pile of pamphlets. Pulling one out, he spread it open and pushed it across the counter toward me.
That's what you can't keep here, and you can't live inside the unit. Nothing flammable or dangerous either. Other than that, we don't care what you put in your unit.
I skimmed the brochure. What about moving vans? I thought I saw a white panel van with your logo on it.
Yeah, we have a few parked out back. If you need to move things, you could rent one. We charge a daily rate and a mileage fee on top of that.
He grabbed a leaflet from a drawer and handed it to me.
Those are the rates, along with the sizes.
And your unit sizes?
They vary, but our largest is 12 by 30. They all have drive-up access. You saw the electronic gate. You have to have the code to get in and out. It's self-serve, so any time of day or night you can get your stuff or put stuff in. If you want us to accept deliveries for your unit, you can schedule those ahead of time. We can let the delivery driver in, but it has to be during business hours, and we won't go in your unit. If the package is small enough, we'll hold it here until you arrive. If it's too large, we put it in our waiting area, but you can only get it during business hours, and we ask that you schedule a pickup appointment.
So I can't get inside without the code.
Correct.
And to get the code, I have to rent a unit?
Also correct.
I read the price sheet. Give me the 5x5.
We rent on a monthly basis, but if you want to sign up for 6 months or a year, you could save 10 to 20%.
Let's go month by month.
Sounds good. I'll just need you to fill this out.
He handed me a clipboard with an attached pen. The best way to figure out what kind of customer information he possessed and where it was kept was by going through the process myself. So I filled out the form and handed it back to him. He entered the information in the computer while I did my best to lean over the counter and read over his shoulder.
Did you want to rent a van to move your items in?
Is it another form?
No, we just had the charge here.
He looked up.
We already have a copy of your license for the unit rental, so it's nothing more than checking a box.
Yeah, all right. I could check the inside of the van for clues, but I had to make sure he gave me the same one I spotted outside Paulie's pawn. He grabbed a set of keys off the board and handed them to me.
Give me 1 sec.
He held up his pointer finger while he waited for the circle on the screen to stop spinning.
You're all set?
He came around the desk.
Let me show you around.
On our way out the door, he flipped the open sign to say back in 5. Then he led me to the electronic gate.
The code is 2217. We change it on the first of the month, every month, to encourage our customers to remember to pay.
We went through the open gate, and I watched it close behind me. He led me to a row of units to the fourth one, on the right, A6. Is this my unit? I asked.
Yep.
He lifted the gate to show me the interior, which was nothing more than a 5-foot by 5-foot square with 10-foot ceilings.
The thermostat is here. As you can tell, it keeps out the humidity and elements to keep your valuables safe. I'm sure you don't want your cards to get damaged, so just set it and go. Should any malfunction occur, we are insured. However, if you'd like to take out additional insurance, we can do that for a fee.
He frowned, realizing he was supposed to have tried to upsell me while we were still in the office. "No, this is fine. I'm sure nothing will go wrong." He showed me how to seal the unit and secure my lock, once I returned with one. Then he led me down a few more rows until we reached the vans. The keys he tossed to me belonged to a different van than the one I'd seen on the surveillance footage. "Can I take that one instead?" I pointed to the van in question.
What's wrong with this one?
"The rear tire looks a little flat, doesn't it? I bet it has a slow leak. See how it leans?"
Yeah, fine. Let me grab the other set of keys. Wait right here.
"No problem." While he was gone, I wandered around the row of units, but every occupied one was locked. I'd have no way of knowing which unit belonged to the thieves, if my assumption was correct. There had to be a way to figure it out. Returning to the van, I peered at the fence, hoping to spot some surveillance cameras, but there weren't any. The guy returned with the new set of keys.
Here you go.
"Do you have security cameras?"
At the front gate.
"That's it?"
That's it.
That wouldn't help either. I could always set up my own security cameras. However, this place was vast. I'd have to do it strategically, and that would require the thieves to return to the unit. I thought about the facility's records and computer system, but just because Knox's collection was stolen 2 weeks ago, that didn't mean the thieves hadn't been doing this for a while and already had the unit set up. My best bet of figuring this out would be tracking down who rented the van on the dates in question. Since it was linked to the unit rentals, I'd figure out which unit, pop it open, and look around. This shouldn't be that hard. If it wasn't a registered unit, but instead one Len Mere saved for its holdings, that would lead me back to questioning the people at Paulie's and possibly paying Mr. Len Mere a visit. "What are your hours? I want to make sure I get the van back to you before you close."
We close at 9 and open at 8.
I took the keys from him and opened the van door. "Any idea who rented this last?"
Why? Now what's wrong?
Obviously, his patience had waned. "Nothing. I was just curious. A buddy of mine recommended this place. He rented a van last Saturday. I thought it'd be funny if it was the same one."
I don't know who rented it. I just type up the paperwork. It all blends together.
"Could you check?" He cocked an eyebrow at me.
That's private. Why does it even matter?
"You're right. It doesn't. I'd just have to find out on my own." The interior of the van proved useless. No GPS, no tracking system, and the front and rear had been cleaned. The only usable prints I found inside matched me. The rest weren't in the system or had been smudged beyond use. "Are you sure there's nothing in the back?" I asked. Amir Karam stepped out of the van and pulled off his gloves. "Trace amounts of cocaine and gunpowder residue. Neither means much on its own, and it's not enough to establish anything. I take it there isn't any forensic science mojo that could magically tell me if this transported valuable sports memorabilia in the last 2 weeks." "You'd be correct." "What about technological means to tell me where the van has been?" Amir blew out a breath. "This is old school. The system is computerized, but it doesn't have any of the usual suspects. It doesn't even have roadside assistance or satellite radio." "How would you treat this if it had been part of a federal investigation?" "I'd sweep the van just like we did, and possibly take tire treads to compare to crime scenes, or run the dirt to see if there was something odd about it, but that's only if it connected to an out-of-the-ordinary crime scene." "That's not going to help us any." "No kidding." Amir looked around the top level of the public parking garage. "It's probably for the best. This isn't the ideal workspace either." "I'm working on it." He nodded and closed the doors. "I have one other suggestion." "What's that?" "Stick a tracker on the van. If your thief uses it to make another delivery to the pawn shop, you'll know about it." Already done. When I returned the van to the rental place, I'd make sure to stick trackers on the other vans, too. Then all I'd have to do is keep my eye on them until the pawn shop received another delivery. I opened the driver's side and climbed in. "Mr. Cross," Amir said, "are you sure you need someone with my skills? This isn't exactly the type of thing most private investigators need. I'm sure you're more than capable of pulling and running prints, and I don't see a private security firm needing much more than that." "I will one of these days. For now, I could use some help when it comes to your other area of expertise." A team broke into Trey Knox's house. I've dug through his online activities and habits, but I didn't see any red flags. I'm guessing the thieves targeted him some other way. They knew precisely how to disarm the security system and when Knox would be out. I need to identify them. "Do you think they're renting a unit from this storage facility to hold their ill-gotten gains in between pawning the merchandise?" "Basically. Or the pawn shop is using the storage facility to hold hot merchandise until it cools down enough to sell. Either way, I have to figure out the connection and who's responsible. Can you find the overlap? He considered the facts.
I'll need exact times and dates. I can't make any promises. It'll be slow going.
Molasses slow. I appreciate anything you can do.
I'll ping cell phone data and compare it to traffic cams and surveillance footage I find, but given hardware limitations and lack of staff, you're more likely to find these guys through other means.
Get started on it anyway.
Fine, but I'll tell you now, this is a waste of my time.
Humor me. Chapter 16. After sticking a padlock on my empty storage unit and tagging the other rental vans, I drove around the city. Procrastinating, that's what my mother would call this. Lazy is what my father would say. There was always more work to do at the office, but Justin assured me he had it handled. I trusted him. Come to think of it, he was one of the few people on the planet who held that honor, though, given the givens, it might have been a curse. During one of my drive-bys, I noticed Paulie's pawn was rather crowded, but I didn't spot any delivery vans. They hadn't called about the ring or any of the other stolen memorabilia, so I decided to wait. Appearing too eager might tip them off. Instead, I went by Trey Knox's place of business. He was in a meeting, but his assistant didn't mind letting me wait. She had a pretty smile and toned legs. Every few minutes, she'd look up from her computer screen and grin at me. I found myself grinning back. When Knox's door opened and a harried-looking man in an Armani suit stepped out, barking a few final words to Knox, I climbed to my feet. His assistant held up a finger that I should wait a moment. She knocked gently on his door jamb and asked if he had a few moments to spare.
"Send him in,"
I heard Knox say. She stepped back and nearly bumped into me in the process.
"He can see you now, Mr. Cross."
"Thanks." I sidestepped, allowing her to pass, before entering Knox's office and pulling the door closed behind me. "Sorry to intrude." Knox tidied his desk, shoving files into drawers and pens into a cup on his desk.
"It's not a problem. Did you find my stuff?"
He tapped a few folders harshly on the desk until they were uniform in height. "I'm meeting with a fence tonight. I also set up surveillance on the vehicle I believe the thieves might be using. As soon as the suspect is en route to sell your items, I will intercept."
"Excellent."
Knox leaned back.
"So, what are we talking? A day? 2 days? A week?"
"I don't know. Aspects of this case don't make much sense to me. The thieves are probably professionals and must have researched you. I'm still curious who would have that kind of access or intimate knowledge of your comings and goings." I glanced behind me. In between the waiting and grinning, I'd asked Knox's assistant about his schedule, but she only offered me available appointment times. She never told me where he'd be or when he'd be there.
"I told you, Lucien, the only thing I care about is getting my stuff back. I don't care who took it. I just want it. That ring is the most important thing. If that's the only item you can recover, I can accept that."
"I didn't realize you were such a defeatist. After getting back that World Series pennant, I figured you'd be more optimistic than this." He stopped shuffling the papers around long enough to stare up at me.
"I'm not. I'm just accepting reality."
"There are other rings." I studied him. "I could get you a replacement in a matter of days."
"I want mine."
"Okay, I'll do my best." Now wasn't the time to press him on the issue, but I had to know. "Did you ever notice a silver SUV following you around?"
"A silver SUV?"
"Uh-huh." He made a face and shook his head.
"Nah."
"You're sure?"
"Yep."
He hit the intercom button.
"Margaret, tell Stone I'm on my way."
He grabbed the stack of files.
"I'm sorry, but I have to prepare a pitch. Thank you for keeping me updated on the situation. If there's anything else I can do, call or text. I'll get back to you as soon as I can."
He lowered his voice to a whisper once he was beside me, and put his hand on my shoulder and mouth near my ear.
"I don't want anyone around here to know I was the victim of a burglary. I'm sure you can understand that."
"No problem."
"Great."
He shook my hand, and I resisted the urge to wipe the sweat from his palm onto my pants leg.
"We'll talk again soon."
"You can count on it." I gave Margaret a goodbye grin with a wink, found the nearest men's room, and washed my hands. Trey Knox was nervous. I just had no idea why, so I decided it was time to check out the scene of the crime. Since Knox lived in a gated community, it was difficult to get in without issue, but I found a way. A nice suit and a luxury car could get a person into plenty of places, and when that failed, bribery often worked. The neighborhood was nice. Quiet. His house didn't look that different from any of the others. Small, multi-story, and expensive, with a postage stamp-sized yard that was maintained by the HOA or whatever governing body ran this place. The dismantled security system had been reinstalled. I knew the code from our earlier interviews, so I let myself in. Knox hadn't been smart enough to change the code, but since the thieves hadn't entered it, changing it wouldn't have made a difference. The motion sensors outside must have picked up on my presence, but by disarming the system, I doubted Knox would be alerted. If he was, the doorbell camera would have shown it was me. He'd call to find out what I was doing. While I waited to see if he received an alert, I wandered around inside. It was clean. Getting in and out without using one of the doors would be difficult, but not impossible. However, it would be detectable. Perhaps that's why the thieves dismantled the system and raised one of the windows. It was easier than breaking the glass and triggering the alarm. Could this be an inside job? That theory had lingered around the back of my mind since the beginning, but Knox didn't have the ring insured, and that's the only item he had repeatedly insisted I recover. Did he point me to that just to distract me from something else? I checked his home office and safe. He didn't have a computer here. His laptop was with him. The rest of his computer equipment had allegedly been stolen. Surely, if he used it for work, he'd have to tell someone what happened. So why the secrecy when I showed up at his place of business? Entering in the code to his safe, yet another thing he'd disclosed to me, I pulled the lever to find it nearly empty. Inside were important documents, bills of sale, letters of authenticity, and policy information. No cash, no jewels, nothing tangible that could be sold. Most of the walls, shelves, and display cases remained bare. A few knickknacks remained, but they didn't have much value. They appeared to be the kind of items one would find on the wall of a sports bar. Unsigned team photos, sports equipment, and a few ruddy balls. The police had already checked everything inside. They dusted for prints and checked for trace evidence, and found nothing. They must have missed something, but I knew I wouldn't find it, whatever it might be. Moving on, I performed a quick search of the rest of the house, focusing mainly on his bedroom and bathroom. Aside from finding a fedora with a silk rose on top of his dresser, which struck me as odd, nothing else was of any interest. Knox hadn't lied. He didn't entertain guests, female or otherwise, and if he did, he made sure they didn't leave a single article of clothing or toothbrush behind. Unsure why I wasted a good portion of the afternoon snooping around my client's house, I reset his alarm system and returned to my car. Sitting inside, I surveyed the area, but I didn't spot any silver SUVs. A white Escalade idled on the corner. Had I seen it before? When I pulled out, I kept an eye on it, but it didn't pursue. I chalked it up to paranoia and decided the only way to combat it was to have a few stiff drinks and some dinner. My favorite steakhouse required reservations, but since I knew the owner, I got a table in back. I didn't dawdle. When I finished eating, I left a hefty tip. My thoughts on Jade. We'd come here several times on dates. She liked the silver and white table linens, the candlelight, and the understated flower arrangements on each table. Stop it, Cross. Shaking my head in the hopes of knocking the melancholia from my mind, I returned to my car. 8:23. I had 3.5 hours to kill. Pushing the potential consequences aside, I drove to the only bar I knew where no one would flirt with me.
What'll it be?
A barmaid I didn't recognize asked. I stared at the bottles behind her. Do you have any Hendrix?
Oh, hell no,
a gruff voice from the other end of the bar snapped. The bar owner shooed her away with the wave of both his hands. Crossing his arms, he leaned back against the counter and stared down at me.
What the hell are you doing here?
Hey, Jim. Nice to see you. Icicles clung to my words.
What are you doing in my bar?
Jim Harrelson, retired cop, asked. I'm just trying to get a drink.
And every other establishment and store in the city suddenly ran out of liquor?
It's possible.
The hell it is!
He grabbed a glass from beneath the bar and poured the clear liquor into it. Shoving it toward me, he said,
Drink up and get out of here.
I can't.
Why not?
This is a cop bar. I'll probably get arrested for drinking and driving if I just drink this and leave.
You're not drunk. That won't make you drunk.
I don't know. I stared down at the glass, carefully wrapping one hand around it and giving it a gentle swirl. This stuff could probably double as lighter fluid. Jim let out an exaggerated sigh.
Are you in trouble?
No, your face says otherwise. My face doesn't say a damn thing. The last time you came around here, you were tailing a cop. Jim leaned over, resting his forearms on the bar in front of me. And you nearly got yourself killed because of it. Your pops and I go way back. I don't want you getting into any more trouble, especially on my watch. You're not in charge of me. Are you 16? I glared at him and knocked back the cheap gin in one gulp. Give me a beer. If I drink any more of that shit, my insides will corrode. He grabbed a pint glass and filled it from the nearest tap. I didn't specify what I wanted, but I never had a problem with the beer at KC's. Just the liquor and clientele. Jim continued to stare at me while I sipped the beer. Why are you here? He asked. Honestly, I don't know. He frowned and wiped the bar in front of me as if I needed constant supervision. What you don't realize, kid, is I know you. I watched you grow up. This is Uncle Jim you're talking to, remember? You came here tonight itching for a fight. No, I didn't. But you're miserable. So are 95% of the people who drink alone at bars. What's your point? When you're miserable, you get self-destructive. You do it all the time, over and over. I do not. Uh-huh. Sure. I snorted derisively. How is drinking at a bar self-destructive? I already told you I have no intention of drinking and driving. Whatever you say. Now he was pissing me off, but I shut up. He could think what he wanted. It didn't matter to me. Lucien, you can't fool me. You came to this bar because you want to punish yourself. Maybe your pops, too. He sighed. Don't pick a fight. The last thing I need is to have to mop your blood and teeth off the floor. The cops in here will kill you. One of them already tried. Glaring at him, I wrapped both hands around the glass and stared at it until he went away. I came here to be alone, not to be bothered. This was a mistake. Hey! A man with a wrinkled, untucked shirt took a seat on the stool beside mine. Have you made any progress? It took me a moment before I realized the man speaking was Joe Gallo. Have you? Is that why you came here? He sipped his mojito. Did Rostakowski tell you I like to come here after a shift? No? Oh, Gallo nodded a few times to himself. Jimmy and your pops were partners, right? You must come here all the time. Have you ever seen me here before? Well, no. That's right. Gallo turned to me and grinned. See? He pointed a finger in my face, his cheeks slightly flushed. I knew you came here to talk to me. This is about as off the record as we can get, yeah? He glanced behind us. All right, let's get a booth so we can talk in private. I'll give you an update on our progress, and you can ask me whatever it is you came here to ask me. Before I could say a word to the contrary, he climbed off the stool and headed for a booth in the back. Picking up my beer, I followed him, wondering if I got knifed or poisoned, if anyone would do a damn thing about it. Who was I kidding? They'd probably celebrate with a round of drinks for everyone. Chapter 17. We think it's a group of teenagers. Young, rich kids who enjoy to rush. Officer Gallo swallowed more of his mojito. You know how people like that can be. He gestured at my appearance. No, how can they be? He chuckled uncomfortably. Hey, I didn't mean anything by it, but you were one of those troublemakers. I didn't grow up rich. This, I indicated my shirt and jacket, I made for myself. As far as being a troublemaker, I'd call it more of a whistleblower. I fought to keep my expression neutral. Sure, whatever. I didn't mean to offend you. I tucked one hand in my pocket to keep Gallo from noticing my fingers were clenched into a fist. So, you think the break-in at Trey Knox's house was conducted by teenagers? I can't say for certain, but we think the other recent home invasions were. A tip came in, and after some digging, we found some online videos of a group of kids inside two of the burglarized homes. Do you remember the link? Gallo glanced around as he removed his phone from his pocket. I have a copy here. He hit play and held it out. I watched the footage for a moment. 3 girls and 1 guy. I couldn't be certain of their ages, but from their clothing, builds, and word choices, they might have been kids or young adults, somewhere in the 15 to 25 age range. At least they were smart enough to wear masks. Are you sure they're just kids?
Yeah, that one? Gallo paused the video and zoomed in. He's wearing a varsity jacket for a local high school. There's the mascot, and if you look closely, you can make out the HS right there.
I squinted briefly at the feed before tapping play. How much damage resulted from these home invasions?
Not much. They stole some jewelry, cash, and a few smaller electronics and appliances, just like what happened to Mr. Knox.
Do you know how they gained access to these other homes?
We're still working on it, but they might have been there before for parties or whatnot.
Parties?
The victims all have children under the age of 21.
Knox doesn't.
No, he doesn't, which is why I'm not sure the crimes are connected.
Gallo stared down at his phone.
Like I told you at the precinct, we're on the same side. Help me out here. Have you found anything to contradict this? I want to help Knox, but I can't do that when the detective in charge is chasing a bunch of bored rich kids.
Why does he think they're committing these crimes?
For the adrenaline rush, probably. It could also be based on a dare or some form of revenge or hazing. We assume the perpetrators must know the kids who live in the homes they targeted, which is how they knew when the families would be out.
Sounds plausible. Any idea what they're doing with the jewelry and electronics?
We're not sure. We've checked area pawn shops, but found nothing. We have feelers out and asked several of the owners we trust to let us know if a kid comes into the store, but no one's seen or heard anything.
Or they just aren't telling you. Gallo pointed a finger at me.
Brilliant deduction.
I leaned back in the seat and rubbed my eyes. Check online. Depending on what kind of jewelry they've taken, they might just mail it off to one of those cash-for-gold places. The cop gave me a cockeyed look.
You're actually helping?
Call it what you want. It was just a suggestion.
Huh.
Despite Gallo's earlier proclamation that we were on the same side, followed by his veiled insults, he genuinely seemed surprised that I'd offer a suggestion, which meant my reputation preceded me.
I'll look into that. Is that what you're doing, to track down Knox's belongings?
You said the police checked area pawn shops? What do you know about Paulie's pawn? He chuckled.
Is that how you answer a question? With a question of your own?
I remained silent and nursed my beer. He didn't have to answer, since I was certain whatever he said wouldn't be the least bit helpful. But I had asked anyway. After all, I didn't know what I didn't know.
You must get that hard-ass thing from your father.
I also get my piercing stare from him, but that's all the bastard gave me.
Yeah, we checked Paulie's. They're one of the biggest pawn shops in the area. They got everything. Microwaves, vacuum cleaners, hunting rifles, knockoff handbags. But they didn't have any of the stolen merch.
Have they been problematic in the past?
Not really.
He narrowed his eyes.
Why? Are you onto something?
Nope.
That's bullshit, and we both know it. Come on, tell me what's going on.
I'd already said more than I should have, but I wasn't worried. I wanted to know what the cops knew.
Quid pro quo?
Yeah, sure. Paulie's was a bust, but a couple of the guys in there made me uncomfortable. I stared at him, searching his face for micro-expressions. And ever since I paid that pawn shop a visit, someone's been following me.
Who?
I don't know. The genuine intrigue on Gallo's face convinced me he didn't know the answer to my question. That didn't rule out the possibility it was a cop. After all, Gallo was a career officer who had misplaced affection for my father. He might have been kept out of the loop intentionally. However, his ignorance reassured me that Will Esposito hadn't filed a police report against me, so that was a plus.
What do these guys look like?
He asked. The ones from the shop?
Yep.
I shrugged. Guys, rough-looking, you know the type, beefy. You could sand down a table with their faces, those kind of guys.
So not a pretty boy like you?
I'm not pretty. Remember the piercing stare? Gallo shook his head.
Is it a requirement to be a smartass in order to get a PI license?
It depends.
No wonder we call you Private Dicks.
I continued to stare at him.
What about the guy tailing you? What does he look like?
I don't know. I've never seen him. I saw two rough-looking gentlemen inside the pawn shop, but I can't be certain it's either of them.
And how do you know someone is following you?
Call it intuition.
I call it paranoid.
Gallo eyed me again, the light bulb flickering on over his head. He'd heard stories.
Maybe you shouldn't worry so much about it. It's probably just a hazard of the job. You spend too much time watching dirt bags. You start imagining they're watching you back.
I didn't say anything. Almeida would want me to give the officer a few details, but something told me that offering up extraneous information would bite me in the ass. I just wasn't sure how, but it would. So, kids, huh? That's the theory. They shouldn't be hard to ID. You know what high school they go to? Ask around. If you find one, you'll find them all.
That's what the detective in charge said.
Gallo finished his mojito and placed the empty glass beside mine. Do you want another? No, I'm on my way out. Gallo looked at his watch.
Yeah, the missus will start wondering where I am if I don't get home soon.
But he lingered. What?
You know something. I just don't know what. But we both know Knox had no reason to cross paths with a bunch of high schoolers.
Maybe they bonded over sports. Your male suspect has a varsity jacket. That could be your connection.
You're shitting me.
I shrugged. No stone unturned, remember? I tapped the table twice and headed for the door. I didn't believe for a second that teenagers were responsible for the break-in at Knox's house, but suggesting they were might be enough to distract Gallo away from my investigation. Sure, I offered up Paulie's pawn, but that was so I could see if the cops had any interest in it, which they didn't. That only reinforced my opinion that they had no idea what they were doing. Unfortunately, neither did I. The cool night air brought my senses to full alert. Instead of going straight to my car, I decided to take a stroll. The FOP stickers and decals on several of the cars told me they belonged to the cops and retired cops inside drinking. Ignoring them, I looked around, but I didn't spot any silver SUVs with bike racks. Instead, I spotted 2 black, 1 white, a red, and possibly a green SUV parked within a block of KCs. This was pointless. I determined as much earlier, yet here I was, standing on the sidewalk playing I Spy. You need a life, Lucien. Jade's right. You probably need to date, or at least get laid. And now, I was talking to myself. Shaking it off, I returned to my parked car and climbed inside. When I pulled out of the space, no one followed me. On the drive to meet Freddie G., I made sure to maintain my speed, use my turn signals, and obey traffic signs. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't even close. But after listening to Jim's accusations, I had a nagging desire to prove I wasn't self-destructive. And since I hadn't come to blows with any cops inside the bar, that meant I needed to avoid coming to blows with any cops outside the bar, too. At least for tonight. When I arrived at the apartment building where Freddie was house-sitting, I took the elevator to the top floor. The front door was cracked open. "Freddie," I called. This wouldn't be the first time he left the door open. Last time this happened, I'd found a trail of lingerie which led to a dozen women in the midst of a naked pillow fight. One of Freddie's other clients had requested a very specific porno, and Freddie was in the midst of filming when I'd come to pick up something unrelated. "Freddie!" My hand traveled to the gun at my hip, just beneath my jacket. "It's Lucien. Are you here?" The living room looked like it had been tossed. The couch cushions lay scattered around the floor. A chair had been overturned, and pieces of broken glass crunched beneath my feet. I continued deeper into the apartment and checked the bedroom. The corner of the sheet hung from a lopsided lamp. Every drawer had been yanked from the dressers and dumped onto the floor. The sound of running water came from the attached bathroom. "Freddie!" Light filtered out from the crack in the door. I nudged it open with my gun hand, reminding myself that I should use my free hand to open doors. "That's why cops always keep their gun hand empty," the voice of one of my academy instructors whispered in my ear. Freddie turned sideways to look at me. "You're late." "Yeah, sorry." Blood ran from his scalp down the side of his face. A large welt had formed near his temple, just above the corner of his left eyebrow. He turned back to the sink, squeezing his eyes shut as he grabbed the edge to steady himself. I stepped closer, noticing the blood droplets on the tile floor and the cracks in the mirror. "What happened?" I asked. Freddie rinsed the washcloth one more time before holding it against his face. "I need to sit down." His knees buckled, and he dropped to the floor like a brick. Chapter 18. Are you sure you don't want me to call an ambulance? I rubbed a hand over my mouth and surveyed the damage.
I'll be okay.
Freddy sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the mess before him.
Fucking assholes.
Who did this?
It doesn't matter.
I fought the urge to protest. What did they want?
You need to leave this alone.
I raised my palms and took a step back. Fine. Freddy tried to stand, wobbled, and plopped back on the edge of the bed. He leaned forward, supporting his head in his hands. You probably have a concussion. Maybe worse. You need a CT scan.
Lucien, stop. I can't. The paramedics will see this mess and call the cops.
Fine, I'll drive you to the hospital. It's no big deal.
No.
Urgent care? Glaring at me, he dragged himself off the bed and headed back into the living room, too stubborn to accept the help I offered.
I can't risk it. They might draw blood, and that'll land me in jail, at least for the night. I'm not getting arrested because of this.
I looked around the room. When's the last time you used?
A few hours ago.
Yeah, that's not gonna work.
No kidding.
Freddy sat in one of the few chairs that remained upright, eyeing the drink cart across the room.
I can't get the ring.
That doesn't matter now.
Yes, it does.
The look on his face worried me.
You have to let this go. You want to get some guy's sports collection back, but that's not worth it. Tell him to start over. What's done is done. I can't help you find the ring or get it back. I'm sorry.
Picking up one of the fallen chairs, I placed it beneath the table and reached for another one. Tell me who did this.
I don't know. They busted in here searching for something.
What did they take?
A half a brick of coke and about 10 grand, give or take.
Shit.
It could have been worse.
Freddy laughed.
It's not like I can report them to the police.
I can handle it.
Let it go, Lucy. I mean it. You need to back the fuck off.
He exhaled and peeled the towel away from his face, checking to see if the wound was still bleeding.
They came here tonight for a reason, and if you'd been on time, you would have been here when they barged inside.
You're telling me they came here for me?
I don't know, but my customers don't typically shove a gun in my face or cold cock me. Only warm cocks are allowed around here.
Freddie G. dealt with plenty of shady types, from drug dealers to fences. Any one of them might have wanted revenge, but Freddie had been in the business for the better part of a decade, possibly longer. He cultivated relationships and exchanged favors. Pissing people off wasn't something he did. Did you welch on a debt? I asked.
Not me.
What's that supposed to mean?
I don't know, but one of them said this would serve as payment for the additional trouble, whatever that means.
What are you working on, besides tracking down the ring for me?
That's about it. Like I told you, I'm house-sitting. I've hosted a few parties, nothing out of the ordinary. Lately, it's just been a lot of little things. Box seats, sold-out tickets, a few dime bags here and there, intel on a competing corporate entity. Let's just say I haven't dealt with anyone who would act this uncivilized or violent. My clientele doesn't burst into my place of business brandishing weapons. They know better. I have a no-tolerance policy.
So this is about the ring.
Whoever stole it doesn't want to give it back, and he sure as hell doesn't want to be found. You should drop the case. These shitheads mean business.
Crossing to the security panel on the wall, I removed the front and peered at the wiring. The penthouse didn't have any cameras inside, which worked in Freddy's favor, but not mine. The building has security cameras. I saw one in the elevator. They might have more. Once I get the footage, I'll figure out who's responsible and sit them down for a nice chat.
Not too nice.
Freddy got out of the chair, slightly more stable than he had been, and rinsed the washcloth in the sink before wringing it out and holding it against his temple.
Is this the kind of thing you do now?
Security? Yeah, it's my shtick. Didn't I give you a business card?
Not that. He swallowed. When I started out 1,000,000 years ago as a runner, I promised myself if I get out I'd never deal with those types again. Occasionally we cross paths, but it's always business. Congenial. Whatever happened here tonight is some back alley shit that I want no part of."
The attack had freaked out Freddie G., the guy who could get you anything at any time. I stepped out of the apartment, but I didn't spot any cameras in the hallway. The one in the elevator would have to do, so I rode down to the lobby. After some cajoling, I was granted access to the security office. The footage didn't show much, but the two guys who rode the elevator to the top floor around 11:30 had to be the men who assaulted Freddie. I printed a few stills and went back upstairs. Freddie had fixed the couch cushions and leaned his head back with the washcloth pressed against the still bleeding gash. At the sound of the door, he opened his eyes and peered at me. A six-shooter sat on the seat beside him. "I come in peace," I eyed the gun. "I've never seen you with hardware."
"I know a guy."
"You know lots of guys." I handed him the printed photo. "Do you know these guys?"
"Aside from our run-in an hour ago, I've never seen them before."
"What exactly did they say and do?"
"They forced their way in as soon as I answered the door. I didn't expect it. I thought it was you."
"I'm sorry." Freddie waved a hand dismissively.
"Serves me right for not checking the peephole."
He turned the photo face down and gave the bar another furtive look.
"They asked if I was alone. One of them dragged me into the bathroom while the other searched the place. I elbowed the son of a bitch, and that's when he rammed me head first into the mirror. After that, everything's foggy. I remember the second one flashing the money and coke at me and saying that was payment for the added inconvenience or whatever. I asked what they were talking about, and they said I better mind my business if I knew what was good for me. I imagine the same holds true for you."
I thought about the silver SUV. Did the assholes follow me to Freddy's? Is that how they knew I'd be here? Or had Freddy's hunt to track down Knox's ring turned the thieves' attention toward him?
"Lucy, why do you look constipated?"
I pulled out my phone and brought up Will Esposito's driver's license. "Do you know this guy?" I handed him my phone.
"No."
"What about anyone who drives a silver SUV?"
"How much time do you have?"
He slid off the couch and headed for the bar. A few glasses and bottles had been smashed. That's what caused the glass to crunch beneath my feet. But the tequila and bourbon remained unharmed. Freddie opened the tequila and took a swig before I could stop him.
"Everyone and their brother drives an SUV."
"You shouldn't drink with a concussion." He looked at me with his one good eye and took another swig from the bottle, just to be spiteful. Still holding it, he returned to the couch and slumped down. Taking the tequila out of his hand, I swallowed a mouthful and placed it on the coffee table out of his reach.
"Come on, man, don't be like that. I got my brains scrambled tonight because of whatever shit you got me involved in."
"Which is why I'm doing what I can to keep you alive." I watched as the washcloth slowly soaked through with his blood. "You need stitches."
"I've already told you."
"You're Freddie G. You must know some doctors who work off the books."
"I'm not in the mood to deal with anyone else remotely sketchy."
Tapping my fingers against my phone, I thought about the people I'd crossed paths with. Surely someone must know a concierge doctor in the city who wouldn't report this. Out of the list of celebs and corporate types, very few would answer my calls, and I couldn't risk going to a valuable and reputable client with this kind of request. Still, there was a very good chance the reason Freddie had been attacked was because of me. I couldn't let that stand. I was supposed to protect people, but I'd repeatedly done a lousy job. Scrolling through my contacts, I stopped on Miranda's personal line. She was clean and sober and had a good head on her shoulders, but she was in the music business. That hadn't always been the case. I dialed her number and waited. After a brief exchange, she said she'd get someone to text me a doctor's info. A few minutes later, my phone chimed. I read the details and made the call. "Help's on the way," I said to Freddie. For once, I'm the guy who knows someone who knows a guy. He laughed.
"I'm surprised you don't have medics on your payroll."
I snorted, though that might not be a bad idea, especially when dealing with clients who might find themselves in similarly problematic situations. I filed that thought away for later consideration, wondering about the insurance and legal ramifications of such actions. While we waited, I called Justin and asked if he could get back to the office to run the photo I emailed him through Facial Rec. Since Freddie shouldn't be left alone, I couldn't do it. I didn't think the men would return, but I didn't trust the fence not to drink himself into a coma or die of a brain bleed because he was too afraid to seek help. So, I waited.
Stop pacing, you're making me dizzy.
I'm not pacing. I'm cleaning up this mess. Actually, I was looking for clues, but according to Freddy, the men wore gloves. Regardless, I hoped to find something damning, but the place looked clean. Even though Freddy had elbowed his attacker, I didn't find any drops of blood anywhere except around the bathroom sink, which I assumed came from him. By the time I finished my search of the apartment, the concierge doctor had arrived. He examined Freddy while I tidied up. The prescription pill bottle full of pre-rolled joints and the pills I found in the cabinet hadn't been touched. Either the men who broke in had no interest in them, or they missed them. The expensive stereo system and AV equipment remained undisturbed, as did several pricey antiques. I was surprised the thieves hadn't taken them or smashed them. This wasn't a robbery. It was a warning. And if it wasn't meant for Freddy, it was meant for me. Chapter 19.
You have no idea who would do this?
Justin asked. No, but it links back to Knox. It has to. I just didn't know why the men who assaulted Freddy didn't empty out the penthouse. Perhaps they'd been in a rush since they knew I would be arriving. But how did they know? And if the point was to threaten me, why didn't they wait for me? I should be the one with a dozen stitches and a concussion, not Freddy.
Freddie G's not exactly Mr. Upstanding Citizen.
No, he's not. But he conducts his business according to a specific set of rules. It's very civilized.
How can it be? He doesn't know what a client will want or what he'll have to do to get it. He could come up against all different types. People far less reputable than some pawn shop owners and those responsible for home invasions.
I looked at the clock. Trust me, this is about Knox. It was too late or too early to call, depending on perspective. But as soon as 7 a.m. rolled around, Knox's phone would be ringing.
Facial rec will take a while. The footage you got from outside the building didn't get a look at the vehicle, so we can't cross-reference that.
Justin yawned. Go home. It's late. Take tomorrow morning off. You deserve it. He gave me a look.
You only call when it's an emergency.
It wasn't, but I wanted to get this started, and I couldn't get back to the office until I knew Freddy was squared away.
What did the doctor say?
He'll be okay as long as he stays away from the drugs and liquor for a while. I didn't know how likely that was, but I couldn't control Freddy. He'd do what he wanted. The doctor agreed to stay and monitor him during the night, something that had cost me a cool $1,000. But time was money, and since I had work to do and couldn't stay, this was the next best thing.
Do you think they'll return?
No, they made their point. They really wanted me to back off. But now I was more intrigued as to why they targeted Knox in the first place and why they'd taken so much offense to me helping him. They won't be back, but it doesn't hurt to make sure. Who's next up on the roster? Justin handed me the info on the unassigned members of our security detail, and I called the first 2 names on the list and had them stake out the penthouse apartment. I'll send you a photo of the attackers. If you see them anywhere near the building, hold them and notify me immediately, I said.
Yes, sir,
one of them said.
Should we call the cops?
The other asked. Yes, let them know you detained a prowler. I'll handle the rest. Disconnecting the 3-way call, I gave Justin another look. You're still here.
I'm going.
He grabbed his jacket.
I'll see you at lunchtime. If you need me sooner.
I won't. He laughed.
Whatever you have to tell yourself, Lucien, but we both know that's not true.
Alone with my thoughts, I couldn't figure out where to start. Too many things needed to be done. I had to pick one and run with it. So I did. Facial rec ran in the background while I honed in on tracking down the SUV. I thought about the times and places I'd been, but most of it was a jumble. The only time I'd been certain I'd been followed was on the way back from the Chinese restaurant. So I phoned in some favors and got access to DOT footage. After an hour of scanning the feed in the hopes of finding the exact moment I passed through the intersection, I backtracked until I spotted the SUV I was sure had been tailing me. With the plate number in hand, I pulled up the vehicle registration information. Danny Foster. According to this, he didn't live anywhere near me or the Chinese restaurant. He could have been lost or running an errand, but I swore I saw the same SUV parked outside my place later that night. Luckily, I'd also requested DOT footage from outside my apartment building on the same night, so I switched to that feed and fast-forwarded. The silver SUV parked less than 10 minutes after I entered the parking garage. Unfortunately, the angle was shit. City footage from stationary cameras left a lot to be desired. I tried zooming in on the driver, but no one ever got out of the vehicle. Whoever it was either remained inside the SUV the entire night or timed their exit perfectly to match with that of a passing truck. I couldn't tell either way. Dialing the number for the building manager, I left a message and asked if he could call me back. My apartment building didn't have the best security system, but it wasn't bad. Getting in and out was difficult for anyone without a fob, but I wasn't sure how many exterior security cameras the building had. The garage had plenty. Cameras covered each door and emergency exit, but I didn't know if any of them pointed that far down the street. I hoped so. Now what? I turned back to the computer program, but it'd be hours, possibly days, before we got a match. So I let myself into the back door of the police department's database and did some digging into Danny Foster. He served in the military and currently owned a gun, so his prints were in the system. He was 38 years old. I checked his driver's license photo again and compared it to the photo of the men who attacked Freddie, but Danny wasn't one of the two men in the elevator. Could Danny Foster have crossed paths with Trey Knox? Grabbing the Knox files, I skimmed the list of names, but Foster's didn't pop. As far as I could tell, he didn't work at any of the auction houses or websites where Knox purchased a part of his collection. Foster could be involved with the trade shows. I hadn't had much luck getting the vendor list and names of everyone who had a booth at every show that Knox had ever gone to. All I knew for certain was Danny Foster wasn't one of the guys he exchanged merch with or contacted. I dug into Foster's social media presence. He had a single profile image. When I did a reverse lookup, I found one photo, and that was it. The only things he posted were articles, pictures, and stories that he'd taken from somewhere else. He didn't put anything personal up. He had hundreds of friends. As far as I could tell, he rarely sent or received messages from any of them, unless they were all done in private. Unsure what Foster had to do with anything, I locked the office and headed to his home address. When I arrived, I scanned the surrounding streets for the silver SUV, but I didn't see it anywhere. So I parked my car in clear view of his front door and waited. Since he'd been so desperate to follow me, I'd make it easy for him. At 4:30 a.m., the front door to the apartment opened, and a man matching Foster's description stepped out in running shorts, compression leggings, and an olive-green hoodie. He lifted one leg and tucked his knee to his chest a few times before repeating the stretch on the other side. Since I was in no mood to chase him through the streets, I got out of the car and approached the stoop where he was now doing hamstring stretches. "Danny Foster?" He didn't look up. "Mr. Foster," I said a little louder. It was pitch out. The only light came from the street lamps half a block away and the two porch lights on either side of the door. He stopped stretching and reached into the pouch of his hoodie. When he finally looked up, he noticed me. Sliding the earbuds out of his ears, he tugged off the hood. Anxiety etched his face. "Mr. Foster?"
Yeah?
His eyes darted from one side to the other.
What can I do for you?
"I have a few questions."
Who are you?
"I'd think by now you'd know."
Look, pal, I don't know what this is or what game you're playing, but you don't want to mess with me.
Ooh, scary. I wondered if I could take him in a fair fight. It didn't matter. I was armed, he wasn't. "You probably should have thought of that before you started following me."
Hey, you came up on me.
He took a step closer to the door.
I'm not looking for trouble.
"Again, you should have thought of that before."
I'm going inside and I'm calling the cops. You don't want to be here when they arrive.
"Fine by me. I'll show them the video footage I have of your SUV following me home the other night." He took a deep breath and held up his palms.
Look, I don't want any trouble. Are you sure it was my SUV?
I rattled off the license plate number even though I had no doubts. Danny rubbed a hand over his close-cropped hair.
That's not mine.
"It's registered to you."
So call the cops. I didn't do anything illegal.
"Stalking is illegal."
I'm not stalking you.
He tried to push past me, and I shoved him back toward the door. Anger burned in his eyes, his chest puffed out, and he shoved me. I moved with the momentum, putting some distance between us and pulling my piece before he got too close. He raised both palms.
Whoa, take it easy.
Tell me the truth.
I wasn't following you. I was following her.
Jade. Why? He glanced to the side, his face contorting.
She used to date a buddy of mine. Some serious shit went down. He's dead now.
He gave me a look.
You should steer clear of that bitch.
My blood boiled. Stay the hell away from her.
Fine, whatever. She's toxic anyway.
I bit my lip, turning back toward my car, my breath coming in angry huffs. For a moment, the only sound I could hear was my own heart beating. Everything moved in half speed as if in slow motion. Then time caught up. I spun around and decked him. It took every ounce of self-restraint I possessed not to beat the living daylights out of him. He was the reason Jade didn't feel safe. He was the reason she left. Okay, part of the reason. But still, a big fucking part. He hurt her, numbnuts, I spat. Scott used to knock her around. He tried to kill her. She barely survived. He looked up at me with both hands in front of his face, protecting his ugly mug from my retaliatory anger.
That's not what I heard. Didn't you read the paper? She must have been involved in some shady shit. Scott tracked her to a motel and got gunned down by some asshole she was meeting.
If you really believe that, who's to say I'm not the asshole? I stared at him. If I'd kill a cop, I don't see any reason why I'd bat an eye before killing you. Danny swallowed. For a tough guy, he'd just lost his nerve. But crazy trumped tough every day of the week. How long were you following her? I asked.
Just that one day. I spotted her at the cafe where she used to work.
I glowered at him, wondering how long it would take the police to respond to a report of gunfire in the area. 5 minutes? 7? What were you going to do?
I wanted to confront her about what went down with Scott, about the trap she lured him into.
I didn't argue, though every cell in my body desperately wanted to. You stayed camp outside my apartment all night.
Most of the night. I fell asleep, and when I woke up, I decided it wasn't worth it and left.
If I ever see you again, I'll kill you. If you go near Jade again, I'll kill you. Do you understand? He let out a grunt, his eyes still on the barrel of my gun.
Yeah.
Good. I thought about all the strange circumstances. Was anyone following me? Where were you tonight?
What?
Answer the fucking question.
At work.
Where do you work?
I'm not telling you. You're crazy.
I cleared my throat. I could find out easily enough. Someone close to me was attacked tonight. If you had anything to do with that, tell me now.
No way. It wasn't me.
He didn't appear to be lying, but I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure about anything at this point. Are you sure? I'll go easier on you if you tell me the truth. You don't want to know what happens if I find out you're lying.
I'm not, I swear.
Narrowing my eyes, I asked one final question. What about Trey Knox?
Who?
Without wasting any more of my time or energy, I turned and headed back to my car, listening for the sound of his footballs behind me. But he didn't try to jump me. When I got to my car, I turned to see him creeping back inside the apartment building. Once inside my car, I locked the doors, placed my gun on the seat, and filled my lungs with air. I was so angry I was shaking. Justin had been right. The last time I'd been this on edge was before I blew up everything around me. This time, I'd do things differently. I had to. 8 minutes later, a patrol car turned down the street. He double-parked behind me, flashed his lights, and hit the siren once, so it'd make that obnoxious sound. I took my gun off the seat and stuck it in the glove box while grabbing my registration. By the time I straightened, he and his partner had stepped out of the vehicle. They approached from opposite sides, with one hand on their service pieces and the other near their belts. The officer who'd been driving rapped against my window, gesturing that I roll it down. "Evening," I said, holding out my identification and credentials. He read my name, the "oh shit" registering a moment later.
Mr. Cross, we received a report that you brandished a firearm and threatened a man.
I nodded at the cards in his hand. That's my carry permit?
You're not going to deny it?
I have a weapon. As you can see, it is not on me at the moment. I kept my hands on the steering wheel. Cops were jumpy. It was best not to give them reasons to freak out. As far as threatening a man, I believe that might have been a misunderstanding. The asshole in question, Danny Foster, admitted to stalking me. He attempted to intimidate Jade McNamara and scared the poor woman into fleeing the city. He's a menace. If he wants to press charges, I'd like to do the same. The cop handed back my credentials and rubbed his neck.
Mr. Cross, no one is pressing any charges, but it'd be best if you head home.
I agree. The cop gave me a final look.
Drive safe.
Yep. I rolled up my window, watching as the officers walked back to their car. They didn't leave until I pulled away. Chapter 20. I didn't go home. Instead, I went back to the office. My hands were still shaking when I turned the key in the lock and pushed my way inside. This had to stop. Forcing a few breaths into my lungs, I checked the computer. Facial Rec continued searching for the assholes who attacked Freddy. So far, I'd threatened 2 men due to the SUV, and I still had no idea if anyone had been following me. Grabbing a notepad, I tried to recall events in the proper order. My timeline had some holes, but until Jade said she'd been followed, presumably by Danny Foster, I hadn't noticed anyone tailing me, and ever since then I'd been hyper-vigilant at observing all vehicles within my vicinity. Grabbing my computer, I did a quick check to see if I could connect any dots between Danny Foster and Scott Renwin. It didn't take more than a few minutes to find Scott's name in Danny's list. I checked the memorial page, which remained, ignoring all the sickening posts celebrating what a wonderful man Scott was. Lies, I thought. Danny had donated to the charitable organization Scott's mother had chosen. At least the bastard told me the truth. Frankly, I didn't care how Danny connected to Scott. He hadn't been there for his friend when his life unraveled. He hadn't been there to stop him from raising a hand to Jade or threatening her life. As far as I was concerned, I had no use for Danny. The familiar twinge in my back reminded me being too tense wasn't healthy, but no matter what I did, I couldn't force myself to relax, so I dug deeper. Danny worked until after midnight, just like he claimed. However, since 2 other men attacked Freddy, I pulled a few more strings and analyzed Danny's phone records. From what I could tell, he didn't hire anybody or phone buddies to beat up Freddy or deliver a message to me. This was a dead end. I had to let it go. Enough. Pushing away from the computer, I stared up at the clock. It was almost 6, an hour to go. If I didn't do something for the next 60 minutes, I'd go insane. The one bright light about this cramped office was the shower I had installed in the bathroom. Justin and Gloria thought I was crazy when I cut out half the vanity and stuck a tiny square stall in the already too small bathroom, but I thought it might come in handy. After showering and changing clothes, I felt like a new man, calmer and more rational. My brain had finally given up on the possibility I'd been followed, which meant the goons who attacked Freddy had done so because of the questions he'd asked. Everyone knew Freddy didn't procure items for himself, so somehow the attackers deduced the collector's ring was for me. Who had Freddy contacted? He always kept his connections private, but I needed to know. I'd asked him numerous times, but he wouldn't budge, even after having the snot kicked out of him. I considered all the ways I could find Freddy's contacts, but he was careful. He used unregistered phones that changed weekly, possibly daily. He kept one number for his clients to use to contact him, but he never used that line to procure items. It was smart. Law enforcement agencies would have trouble pinning him down, should his actions prove illegal. So how was I supposed to track him? His internet activity was hidden behind a VPN and other ingenious protections. At this rate, I should probably hire him to work for me. Freddy had a car, but he rarely used it. His location always changed. At the moment, he was house-sitting. Before that, he had rented a condo, and before that, it had been a hotel room. Since I was unsure how to track Freddy's movements, I couldn't help but wonder how his attackers had found him. He didn't broadcast his address, except to clients and friends. That made me pause. How did they find him? Did they track Freddy? Or did they track me? Shit. I ran a hand through my hair before realizing what I was doing and forcing myself to stop. That was one tell I had to eliminate. And you've come full circle. Letting out a frustrated sigh, I picked up the phone and dialed Knox.
Hello?
Knox sounded tired. 6:45, that was close enough. Morning, Mr. Knox. This is Lucien Cross.
What's going on?
What isn't? I fought to keep the annoyance out of my voice. I'm emailing you a photo now. Tell me who these men are. I sent a copy of the still taken from the surveillance footage to Knox and waited. Knox's phone emitted several clicks before he said,
I'm not sure.
Have you seen them before?
Maybe.
And around we go. Again, we were playing the same game. The longer this went on, the more I wanted to get off this carousel. Do you know either of them?
I'm not sure. The one on the left with the darker hair and the scar on his cheek? I think I've seen him before.
Where? Help me out here. Could it have been at work?
No, I don't think so.
At one of the auction houses or trade shows?
They're sports collectors' conventions,
Knox corrected.
But to answer your question, no, it wasn't there.
Then where?
A bar, maybe?
Okay, which one? Luckily, the call was on speaker, or I would have thrown the phone in frustration. While Knox thought about it, I pulled up a copy of his credit card statement and checked to see which bars he'd been to recently.
It might have been McGinty's, but I can't be certain. He might work there. I feel like I've seen that scar on a bouncer or something.
Does McGinty's have bouncers? Sports bars usually didn't, but bar fights were common enough, especially in establishments where betting occurred.
The dishwasher or busboy or whatever doubles as security, I think.
Fine, I'll check it out.
Is that necessary?
I stopped. Why wouldn't it be necessary?
I thought you said you had a lead on getting back the ring and my other stuff. What does that have to do with these two guys in the photo?
Possibly everything.
Are you sure?
Knox asked.
Like I said, I'm not even sure if I recognize that one. It just seems like a lot of extra trouble to go to for no reason.
You hired me to do a job for you. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
He hung up. Was it me? I shook the thought away. McGinty's closed a few hours ago. They wouldn't open again until after 4. That meant I couldn't see if the man who attacked Freddie was the same who worked in the sports bar. What else could I do? Getting up, I circled my desk a few times, made coffee, and drank it while staring out the window. When I knew what I was doing, work kept me busy, focused. I could push everything else out of my mind and do what had to be done. But ever since Jade told me she was coming back to town, my mind had been elsewhere. That had never happened before, and I didn't like it. So I tried to bury myself deeper into Knox's case, but I didn't know how to proceed. I didn't give a shit about Knox's stolen property, but I cared a great deal about my contact getting attacked, and even more about Jade being followed. The two didn't appear connected. Intellectually, I knew they weren't. It was bad timing, a coincidence. But my mind had latched onto a pattern that didn't exist, and I couldn't shake it. Breathe. Inhaling slowly through my nose, I held my breath for 4 seconds before letting out a lengthy exhale. I repeated this 20 times until my thoughts cleared. While I waited for Gloria to arrive at the office and the rest of my day to get underway, I dissected the Knox file and my notes, separating out what wasn't relevant or related. Before I finished my project, the computer dinged. Facial recognition identified the man on the right, the one without the scar. His name was Alexei Balakin. He had several assault charges on the record. From what I could tell, he was hired muscle. He got paid to beat people up, which is what he'd done the previous night. But he didn't work for one guy. He floated around. This wasn't helpful. I ran a list of his known associates, but I didn't find the man with the scar. From what I gathered, Alexei was a hitter who typically worked alone. He'd flitted from loan shark to loan shark, taking a cut of the money he recovered. Trey Knox gambled online. We saw the charges on his bank statement. I'd also seen a few withdrawals from ATMs near his preferred sports bar. but I couldn't be sure that was to pay a bookie. The amounts were always a couple hundred, which could have covered a business dinner or just a night out with friends. For someone to hire a hitter like Alexei, the debt would have to be at least several grand. It was still early, especially for Freddie, but I sent him a text to see if he was awake. When he didn't reply, I assumed he was sleeping off the ordeal, and most of the morning per his usual. What did he say to me last night? The thieves took the cocaine and cash as payment for the additional trouble? Meaning what? Had Alexei already been hired to recover a debt? It had to be Knox's. Since I'd been a money guy, I combed through Knox's financial statements, searching for the discrepancy. But I didn't see anything to indicate that he had an outstanding gambling debt. He hadn't paid off his credit cards or house, but he had money in the bank. He received a steady paycheck. Part of it went into his 401k. People who owed loan sharks money didn't behave like that. They didn't invest in a future. Their first priority was usually to keep their kneecaps. I called Knox again. "Mr. Knox, do you have a gambling addiction?"
What?
"Humor me."
No.
"What about outstanding debts?"
My credit card companies might think so.
"Anyone else?" He didn't answer immediately.
No. And I don't appreciate your tone. If you're worried about receiving payment for your services, you should know I'd be more than happy to drop off a check to cover whatever expenses you've already incurred.
"That won't be necessary."
Sounds like you're trying to nickel and dime me. Did you run my credit report? You'll see my credit is fine.
It was passable, but I didn't want to quibble or admit to having checked into the client. That would be bad for business, so I backed off. "I'm just trying to figure out why someone would steal your collection. Since you are such an avid fan who participates in fantasy leagues and online sports books, I'd be remiss not to consider the possibility the theft was revenge."
Well, it isn't.
He sounded indignant.
Let me ask you a question. Is this how you conduct business with all your clients? Traumatizing victims and blaming them is not the way to go. It's bad enough when actual law enforcement does it, and a travesty when lawyers in the courtroom or the media do the same thing, but I will not have a private investigator, someone I personally hired and paid, treat me like a criminal, like the theft was my fault. Do I make myself clear?
"Yes, sir."
Good. I suggest you remember this lesson when you deal with your future clients. I've put up with a lot of your off-the-wall questions and accusations. I'm not doing it anymore. If this continues, I'll take my business elsewhere and seek to sever our contract. Is that clear?
"Yes," I said, forcing myself to remain professional.
Very well.
The only thing I learned from that phone call was how much I disliked Trey Knox.